I arrived at the intensive care unit at 2 in the morning to find my only daughter clinging to life by a thread. While surgeons fought to keep her heart beating, her husband was popping champagne bottles on a luxury yacht celebrating his freedom. He thought I was just a poor retired laborer from the South. He had no idea that I owned the very boat he was standing on. By the time the sun came up, he would be homeless, penniless, and begging for mercy. My name is Jefferson Moore, and this is how I reminded my son-in-law that you never mess with a father's love. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family members who underestimated your worth. The automatic doors of the Cedars-Sinai intensive care unit slid open with a hiss that sounded like a snake warning its prey. The air inside was cold enough to freeze bone, carrying that distinct, sharp scent of rubbing alcohol and imminent death. I walked down the sterile hallway, my work boots making a heavy, dull thud against the polished linoleum floor. It was 2 in the morning in Los Angeles, but inside these walls, time did not exist. There was only the rhythmic, terrifying beeping of cardiac monitors, a digital metronome counting down the seconds my daughter Zoe had left. I found room 402. The sight that greeted me stopped me in my tracks. Zoe looked so small in that hospital bed. She was surrounded by a fortress of machinery. Tubes ran into her nose and arms like a spider web of plastic pumping fluids in and draining fluids out. Her skin was the color of ash. Her chest rose and fell with a mechanical jerk forced by the ventilator that was breathing for her. She was 32 years old, but in that moment she looked like the little girl I used to carry on my shoulders, the little girl I had promised to protect. I pulled a plastic chair next to her bed. The metal legs scraped against the floor, a harsh sound in the quiet room. I sat down and took her hand. It was cold. I rubbed her knuckles with my rough, callous thumb, trying to transfer some of my warmth to her. I whispered her name, but her eyes remained closed, sunken deep into her skull. The complications from her congenital heart defect had struck fast and hard. A nurse walked in to check the IV bags. She paused when she saw me. Her eyes scanned my worn canvas jacket, my faded jeans, and the old baseball cap I held in my hands. I saw the look. It was the same look I had seen 1,000 times in corporate boardrooms and luxury hotels before they knew who I really was. It was a look of pity mixed with judgment. She saw an old black man who looked like he could barely afford a bus ticket, let alone the astronomical costs of a private ICU room in Los Angeles. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice polite but firm. "Visiting hours are over and this is a restricted area." "Are you a relative?" "I am her father," I said. My voice was raspy from the flight and the lack of water. She looked at her clipboard and then back at me. "The records say her emergency contact is her husband, Blake Sterling. We have been trying to reach him for 6 hours. The patient needs urgent surgery to repair a ruptured valve. We need his consent." I looked at Zoe's pale face. "Where is he?" I asked, though I already felt the answer in my gut. The nurse hesitated. "Mr. Sterling answered the first call at 8 this evening. He said he was meeting with a specialist to discuss treatment options and that he would be here shortly. He has not answered his phone since." A specialist. I almost laughed. Blake Sterling would not know a heart specialist from a heart attack. He was a man who specialized in spending money he did not earn and charming people he did not respect. Dr. Aris, the chief cardiothoracic surgeon, marched into the room a moment later. He looked exhausted. He wore surgical scrubs and a white coat that seemed too big for his shoulders. He stopped short when he saw me sitting there. "Where is the husband?" Dr. Aris demanded, looking at the nurse. "We cannot wait any longer. Her pressure is dropping. If we do not operate within the hour, the damage will be irreversible." The nurse gestured helplessly toward me. "This is her father, doctor." Dr. Aris turned his attention to me. His gaze was sharp, assessing. He saw the same things the nurse saw. The poverty, the age, the irrelevance. "Sir," he said, speaking slowly as if I might have trouble understanding English, "your daughter is in a critical state. Her husband is the legal next of kin. He holds the medical power of attorney. Without his signature or his verbal consent, my hands are tied. We have called him 50 times. I stood up. At 6'2", I towered over the doctor. I straightened my back, shedding the posture of a tired old man. "I am Jefferson Moore," I said, my voice filling the small room. "I am her biological father. If her husband is missing in action, the authority falls to me. Bring me the papers. I will sign them, and I will take full financial responsibility." The doctor blinked. He looked at my jacket again, likely wondering if my credit score was even in the triple digits. The surgery will cost upwards of $200,000, Mr. Moore. And that is just the deposit. The insurance company is reviewing the claim because this was a pre-existing condition. If they deny it, you will be liable. Bring me the papers, I repeated. My tone left no room for argument. The doctor signaled to the nurse. She hurried out and returned with a tablet. I signed my name on the digital screen with a finger that did not shake. I did not care about the cost. Money was just paper. My daughter was flesh and blood. As the medical team began to prep Zoe for transport to the operating theater, the nurse handed me a small plastic bag containing Zoe's personal effects. Her wedding ring, her watch, her phone. You might want to hold on to these, the nurse said softly. I took the bag. The phone lit up in my hand. It vibrated with a notification. I looked down at the screen. It was an Instagram notification. Someone had tagged Zoe in a photo. My thumb hovered over the screen. I knew I should not look. I knew I should focus on praying for my daughter. But a cold fury was rising in my chest, a survival instinct that had served me well in the trenches of business warfare. I unlocked the phone. Zoe's passcode was my birthday. Of course it was. She was the only one in this world who truly loved me. The Instagram app opened. The image loaded. The breath left my lungs. It was a photo of Blake. He was wearing a white linen suit unbuttoned halfway down his chest, exposing his tanned skin. He was holding a glass of golden champagne, raising it in a toast toward the camera. He was standing on the deck of a yacht, the teak wood gleaming under the warm glow of string lights. Behind him, the ocean stretched out dark and infinite. A young woman with blonde hair was laughing in the background, her hand resting familiarly on his shoulder. But it was the caption that made my vision blur with red rage. Freedom is the best medicine. Yacht life, solo, golden horizon. He had posted it 10 minutes ago, while my daughter lay in a hospital bed, her chest rising and falling only by the grace of a machine. Her husband was drinking champagne on a boat. He wasn't meeting with a specialist. He wasn't stuck in traffic. He was partying. I looked closer at the photo. I recognized the railings. I recognized the specific grain of the teak wood deck. I recognized the name of the boat tagged in the location. The Golden Horizon. A dark, cold smile touched my lips. It was a smile that would have terrified my competitors back in the days when I ran the logistics empire that spanned 50 states. Blake thought the Golden Horizon belonged to one of his rich frat boy friends. He thought he was rubbing shoulders with the elite. He had no idea that the holding company that owned the charter service that operated that yacht was a subsidiary of Moore Global Logistics. He was standing on my boat. He was drinking champagne bought with my daughter's credit card. He was celebrating his freedom while his wife died. I looked at Zoe one last time as they wheeled her out of the room. "Fight, baby girl," I whispered. "You fight for your life. I will handle the trash." I sat back down in the hard plastic chair. The room was empty now, save for the ghost of the machinery's noise. I pulled my own phone from my pocket. It was an old model cracked screen, nothing flashy. It was the phone of a man who didn't need to impress anyone. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed. Sloan, my attorney. The only person in Los Angeles who knew that Jefferson Moore was not just a retired grandfather, but a man who could buy this entire hospital if he felt like it. It was 3 a.m. Sloan answered on the first ring. She knew I never called unless the world was burning. "Mr. Moore." Her voice was sharp, alert. "Sloan," I said, my voice low and steady. "I need you to run a check on a vessel docked at Marina del Rey, the Golden Horizon. Confirm the ownership structure." There was the sound of typing on the other end. "Give me 30 seconds, sir." I waited. I looked at the Instagram photo again. Blake's smile was wide, arrogant, the smile of a man who thought he had won the lottery. He had tagged Zoe. He wanted her to see this. He wanted her to know he didn't care. Or maybe he was just so drunk and stupid he didn't realize the cruelty of it. It didn't matter. The intent was irrelevant. The action was a declaration of war. "It is one of ours," Sir Sloan said. "It is held under the shell company Blue Water Ventures, which is wholly owned by the Moore Trust." "Good," I said. "And check the credit card activity for Blake Sterling." More typing. "Sir, there is a pending charge from 30 minutes ago. $5,000 for catering and alcohol service aboard the Golden Horizon. The card is in Zoe Moore's name." My grip on the phone tightened. He was using my dying daughter's money to celebrate her absence. "Freeze it," I said. "Sir, freeze the card," I commanded. "Do not decline the charge yet. Let him drink the champagne. Let him get comfortable. But the moment he tries to swipe that card for the next round or to pay the docking fees or to impress his little friends, I want it to be declined. I want the fraud alert to scream. And Sloan, yes, Mr. Moore, contact the harbor master. Tell them the owner of the Golden Horizon is invoking the immediate repossession clause. But do not kick him off yet. Trapping a rat is easy. I want to make sure he has nowhere to run when the cage closes." I hung up the phone. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. The silence of the hospital room was heavy, but my mind was loud with the sound of crashing waves and justice. Blake Sterling wanted a life of luxury. He wanted to live like a king on his wife's dime. Tonight he was going to learn a very expensive lesson about who really holds the crown. The surgery would take 6 hours. That gave me 6 hours to ruin his life. I stood up and walked to the window looking out over the city lights of Los Angeles. Somewhere out there in the dark water, my son-in-law was raising a glass. "Enjoy it, Blake," I whispered to the glass. "It is the last drink you will ever take on my dime." The monitor beside Zoe's bed erupted into a frantic, high-pitched scream that tore through the silence of the ICU. My daughter's body arched off the mattress. Her eyes rolled back, showing only the terrified whites as a violent seizure seized her small frame. Nurses swarmed into the room like a well-drilled tactical unit. I was pushed back against the cold wall. I watched their hands move in a blur of blue nitrile gloves, injecting sedatives, adjusting oxygen flows, shouting vitals that meant nothing to me, but sounded like a countdown to the end. I saw my daughter's chest heave. I saw the tube in her throat rattle against her teeth. I saw the life trying to leave her body, fighting against the machinery designed to keep it prisoner. I looked down at the phone in my hand, the screen still glowing with the image of her husband. The contrast was a physical blow to my gut. While Zoe was convulsing in a sterile room that smelled of bleach and despair, Blake was living in a world of white linen and golden light. I zoomed in on the picture again. It was a white party. Everyone on the deck of the Golden Horizon was dressed in pristine white, a mockery of the purity they clearly lacked. Blake stood in the center, a king holding court. His head was thrown back in laughter, his teeth gleaming as brightly as the diamond watch on his wrist. But it was the woman next to him that made my blood run cold. She was not just a guest. She was draped over him, her arm looped through his, her head resting on his shoulder with a familiarity that spoke of long nights and shared secrets. She was blonde, young, and wearing a white bikini top that left nothing to the imagination. In the background of the photo, I could see the spread of food. Towers of seafood on ice, crystal bowls of caviar, bottles of premium vodka frosted with cold. It was a scene of absolute indulgence. It was a celebration of excess. And it was happening at the exact same moment my daughter's heart was trying to stop beating. The nurses stabilized Zoe. Her body went limp again, sinking back into the sheets as the sedatives took hold. The monitor returned to its rhythmic, ominous beeping. The crisis had passed, but the war had just begun. I looked at Blake's face on the screen one last time. He looked so confident. He looked untouchable. He thought he was the smartest man in the room, playing the grieving husband to the doctors while playing the playboy to his friends. He had no idea that the man he called a peasant was about to burn his kingdom to the ground. I stepped out of the room, needing air that didn't taste like sickness. The hallway was empty. I walked to the large window at the end of the corridor, looking out at the sprawling lights of Los Angeles. Somewhere out there, floating on the dark Pacific, was my target. I pulled my phone out again and dialed Sloan. She answered on the first ring, her voice crisp and alert despite the hour. She was the best attorney money could buy, and right now I needed her to be a weapon. "Sloan," I said, my voice low and steady. "I am looking at a photo of Blake Sterling on the deck of a yacht called the Golden Horizon. He is hosting a party. He thinks he is a guest of honor. I need you to confirm something for me." "Who owns that boat?" I heard the rapid clicking of a keyboard on the other end. Sloan did not ask why. She did not ask about Zoe. She knew that when I asked a question, I needed an answer, not sympathy. "One moment, Jefferson," she said. I waited. I watched my reflection in the dark glass of the window. I saw an old black man with gray hair and tired eyes. I saw the face Blake saw when he looked at me. He saw a retired truck driver. He saw a man who lived in a modest house in Georgia and drove a pickup truck from the 90s. He saw a man he could manipulate, lie to, and eventually discard. He never looked close enough to see the man who had built a logistics empire from a single van. He never saw the man who knew how to navigate complex corporate structures better than he knew how to navigate his own marriage. The Golden Horizon. Sloane said, her voice cutting through my thoughts. It is registered in the Cayman Islands under a holding company called Poseidon Ventures. Poseidon Ventures is a wholly owned subsidiary of Moore Global Logistics. I closed my eyes and let out a long, slow breath. It was exactly as I suspected. Blake was so desperate to be seen as wealthy, so desperate to fit in with the high society crowd he idolized, that he didn't even know who signed the checks for the toys he played with. He had likely bragged his way onto that boat using his wife's connections, never realizing those connections led straight back to me. "So I own it," I said. It was not a question. "You own it," Sir Sloane confirmed. "You own the boat. You own the fuel in the tank. You own the very deck he is standing on. Do you want me to call the captain? I can have the Coast Guard board the vessel and remove him for trespassing." I thought about it. I imagined the sirens, the lights, the humiliation of being dragged off the boat in handcuffs in front of his friends. It was tempting. It would be satisfying. But it was too fast. It was too merciful. Blake Sterling deserved to suffer. He deserved to feel the ground crumble beneath his feet slowly, to realize that his entire life was a house of cards that I was about to blow over. "No," I said. "Not yet. Trespassing is a slap on the wrist. I want to hit him where it hurts. I want to hit his wallet. Or rather, the wallet he thinks is his." I turned away from the window and looked back down the hallway toward Zoe's room. She was fighting for her life because her heart was failing. Blake was partying because he had no heart at all. "Check the financials, Sloane," I ordered. "He is throwing a party. That means he is spending money. Find out whose money he is spending." The keyboard clicked again, faster this time. I could almost see Sloane's eyes scanning the data streams, hunting for the transaction. "I see it," she said. "There is a tab open with the Yacht's concierge service. It is currently at $18,000 and climbing. He has ordered premium bottle service, a private chef, and a DJ. And the card on file," I asked, though I already knew the answer. "It is a Platinum Business American Express," she said. "Issued to Zoe Moore. He is an authorized user." Of course he was. He was drinking champagne paid for by the woman he had left to die. He was buying affection from a blonde stranger with the wealth my daughter had worked so hard to build. The rage flared hot in my chest, a physical pain that was almost blinding. But I pushed it down. Rage was useful fuel, but it made for a sloppy driver. I needed to be cold. I needed to be precise. $18,000, I repeated. That is a lot of champagne. "He just authorized another round," Sloane updated. "The total is now crossing 20,000. He is trying to impress the crowd." "Good," I said. Let him be the big man. Let him buy the whole bar. Let him think the night will never end." Sir Sloane sounded confused. "You want me to let the charges go through?" I walked back toward the ICU doors. I watched the nurses moving around Zoe's bed, adjusting the sheets, checking the lines. They were doing their job. Now I had to do mine. "No, Sloane," I said. "I do not want the charges to go through, but I do not want to decline them yet either. If we cut him off now, he will just be embarrassed. He will make up some excuse about a bank error. He will laugh it off. I want this to be a catastrophe. I want him to be standing there with the bill in his hand and no way to pay it." I waited a beat, letting the plan form fully in my mind. "Monitor the transaction," I commanded. "Wait until the party is peaking. Wait until he calls for the check to close out the tab. Wait until he hands that black card to the server with that arrogant smirk on his face. And then, Sloane, I want you to kill it. Kill the card. Kill it all," I said. "Freeze the account. Flag it for fraud. Report it stolen. I want that card to be as useless as a piece of plastic scrap. I want the machine to beep red. I want the server to look at him and say it was declined. I want him to have to fish for another card, and I want you to freeze those too." "Do we have access to his personal accounts?" "We do," Sloane said. "We set up the joint monitoring when you transferred the initial trust fund." "Freeze them," I said. "Every single one. Checking, savings, the emergency fund. Leave him with nothing but the lint in his pockets." "Understood," Sloane said. Her voice had shifted. She was no longer just an attorney. She was the executioner. "And the boat, call the captain," I said. "Tell him the owner is invoking the immediate return clause due to unauthorized use and potential criminal activity. Tell him to cut the engines. Tell him to cut the music. Tell him to turn up the lights. I want the party to end in silence. I want Blake to be standing in the quiet holding a declined credit card, realizing he is stranded in the middle of the ocean with a $20,000 debt he cannot pay. It will be done, Sloane said. One more thing, I added. Make sure the captain announces it. I want everyone on that boat to know why the party is over. I want them to know that Mr. Sterling is not the man he pretends to be. I hung up the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. I walked into Zoe's room and sat down again. The chair was hard and uncomfortable, but I didn't mind. I needed to stay awake. I needed to be here when she woke up. And I needed to be ready when Blake's world collapsed. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was almost 3:30 in the morning. On the yacht, the music would be thumping, the champagne would be flowing, Blake would be laughing his arm around his mistress, feeling like the king of the world. He had about 30 minutes left. 30 minutes of fantasy before reality came crashing down like a tidal wave. I took Zoe's hand again. It felt a little warmer. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it was hope. Hold on, baby girl, I whispered. Daddy is taking care of the monsters. I settled in to wait. I imagined the scene on the boat. I imagined the moment the music died. I imagined the look on Blake's face when the server handed the card back. It would be a look of confusion first, then annoyance, then panic. Pure, unadulterated panic. He would check his phone, he would try to transfer money, and he would find nothing. Zero. He would realize he was trapped. He was miles from shore, surrounded by people he was trying to impress with no money and no way out. He would be exposed as a fraud. And then he would do what cowards always do. He would call me. He would think I was his safety net. He would think he could lie his way out of it. I stared at my phone, waiting for it to ring. I was ready for his call. I was ready for his lies. And I was ready to close the trap. The white party was about to go dark. The Pacific Ocean breeze was likely cooling the sweat on Blake Sterling's brow. But miles away in the sterile silence of the intensive care unit, I could feel the heat of his arrogance radiating through the digital connection I had established. My attorney Sloane was relaying the scene on the yacht with clinical precision, her voice in my earpiece painting a picture of debauchery that stood in stark, violent contrast to the rhythmic, mechanical breathing of my dying daughter. On the deck of the Golden Horizon, the party had reached a fever pitch. The music was a thumping bass line that vibrated through the teak floorboards, a heartbeat far stronger than the one struggling inside Zoe's chest. Blake was holding court in the center of the VIP section, a space I had designed for quiet reflection, but which he had turned into a stage for his ego. He was surrounded by people who did not know him, people who were drawn to the smell of money, like sharks to blood. He was telling them a story, his voice loud and slurring slightly from the premium vodka he had been consuming by the bottle. He was talking about Zoe. He was not asking for prayers. He was not expressing fear. He was talking about her like she was an anchor he was finally about to cut loose. She has always been sick, Blake told a man in a tailored Italian suit. It is a burden, truly. You have no idea what it is like to be married to someone who is always tired, always weak. I have put my life on hold for 5 years, but the doctors say this might be it. It is tragic, of course, but everyone has a time. And when it happens, I will finally be able to breathe. I will finally be able to live the life I was meant for. I sat in the dark hospital room and listened to him bury my daughter before she was even dead. My hands clenched into fists so tight my knuckles turned the color of old bone. He was selling his grief for sympathy and social capital. He was pre-spending her life insurance in his mind. He turned to the blonde woman draped over his arm, the mistress whose name he probably did not even know, and flashed a smile that was all teeth and ambition. "Let us not bring the mood down," he shouted, raising his empty glass. "Tonight is about the future. Tonight is about the horizon. Garçon, bring us 10 more bottles of the vintage Dom, the 1998, and bring a round of shots for everyone. On me." The crowd cheered. They toasted his generosity. They toasted his freedom. They had no idea they were drinking to the health of a man who was about to be destitute. I signaled Sloane. It was time. On the yacht, the server approached Blake with a silver tray. He looked hesitant. He had likely been informed by the captain that the ownership status of the vessel was in flux, but Blake was oblivious. He pulled out the black American Express card with a flourish, the card that bore Zoe's name, but which he treated as a birthright. He slapped it onto the tray with the confidence of a man who has never had to work for $1 in his life. "Keep it open," Blake commanded. "We are just getting started." The server took the card. He walked to the portable terminal set up on the bar. He swiped it. I waited. The seconds stretched out taut as a wire. On the boat, the machine let out a sharp, dissonant beep. A red light flashed. The server frowned. He wiped the magnetic strip on his apron and swiped it again. Beep. Declined. Blake was busy laughing at a joke he had just made, unaware that the ground was shifting beneath his Italian loafers. The server walked back to him, his expression professional but firm. "Sir," the server said, his voice cutting through the laughter, "I am afraid the card has been declined." Blake stopped laughing. He looked at the server as if the man had spoken in a foreign language. "That is impossible," he sneered. "It is a platinum card. There is no limit. Run it again." "I did run it, sir. Twice. The bank has flagged it. It is dead. Do you have another form of payment?" The blonde woman pulled away from him slightly. The circle of friends grew quiet. The smell of blood was in the water. Blake laughed, a nervous, hollow sound. "Banks," he said, rolling his eyes. "They probably froze it because of the large transaction. Fraud protection. It happens when you spend this kind of money. Here." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a gold Visa. This was his personal card, funded entirely by the transfers he siphoned from Zoe's accounts. He handed it over with a dismissive wave. "Use this one, and add 20% for your trouble." The server took the Visa. He walked back to the machine. He inserted the chip. I watched the vitals on Zoe's monitor. Her heart rate was steady but weak. She was holding on. She was waiting for me to finish this. Beep. Declined. The server returned. "This one is declined as well, sir. Code 05. Do not honor." Blake's face flushed a deep, ugly red. The sweat on his forehead was no longer from the heat of the dance floor. It was the cold sweat of fear. He snatched the card back. "Your machine is broken," he snapped. "I have $50,000 in that account." "I am sorry, sir," the server said, his voice growing louder as the music dipped. "The machine is working perfectly. We just ran a tab for the gentleman at the next table. Both your cards have been rejected by the issuer. The current tab is $22,400. We need an immediate method of payment." The whispers started. I could almost hear them. The elite of Los Angeles do not tolerate failure, and they certainly do not tolerate poverty. The man in the Italian suit took a step back. The blonde woman checked her phone, suddenly bored. I authorized the next phase. Sloan relayed the order to the captain. Suddenly, the music on the yacht cut out completely. The silence was jarring. The heavy bass that had been vibrating through the deck was replaced by the sound of waves lapping against the hull and the hum of the generator. The harsh work lights on the upper deck slammed on, flooding the party with a blinding, unflattering white glare. It washed out the mood lighting. It exposed the stains on the tablecloths and the sweat on the guests' faces. It made Blake look pale and small. A voice boomed over the public address system. It was the captain, his voice distorted by the speakers but unmistakably authoritative. "Attention guests, this is Captain Henderson. I have been informed by the owners of this vessel that the current charter has been terminated effective immediately due to non-payment and suspected fraudulent activity. Mr. Sterling, you are required to settle your outstanding balance of $22,000 at the bridge immediately, or you will be escorted off the vessel by harbor security upon docking. We are turning the ship around. Please prepare for disembarkation." The announcement hung in the air like a cloud of toxic gas. Fraudulent activity, non-payment, escorted off. The words stripped Blake naked in front of the very people he had spent 5 years trying to impress. The blonde woman did not just step back. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd without a backward glance. The man in the Italian suit laughed, a cruel barking sound. "Nice party, Blake," he mocked. "Maybe next time check your balance before you order the vintage." Blake stood frozen in the center of the deck. He looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. He looked at his cards. He looked at the server who was waiting with crossed arms. He looked at the guests who were now looking at him with open contempt. The illusion was shattered. The king was a pauper. He needed money. He needed it right now. He needed enough to pay the bill and salvage some shred of his dignity. He needed a victim. I watched as he fumbled for his phone. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He swiped through his contacts. He was not calling his friends. He knew they would not lend him a dime. He was not calling Zoe. He knew she was unconscious. He was calling the only person he thought was stupid enough to believe him. He was calling the old retired truck driver from Georgia. He was calling me. My phone buzzed against the hard plastic of the hospital tray table. The screen lit up. Son-in-law. I let it ring 3 times. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted him to imagine the harbor police waiting at the dock. I wanted him to feel the walls closing in. On the 4th ring, I picked up. I made my voice sound groggy, confused the voice of an old man waking up from a nap in a plastic chair. "Hello, Blake. Is that you? Is Zoe okay? Dad?" Blake's voice was high-pitched, bordering on hysterical. He was shouting over the sound of the wind, trying to create a fiction in real time. "Dad, thank God you picked up. Listen to me. I am at the hospital. The reception is terrible here. I can barely hear you." He was lying. He was standing on the deck of a yacht surrounded by people who despised him, but he was lying to the man he thought was a fool. "The hospital?" I asked, injecting a note of senile confusion into my tone. I thought you were meeting a specialist." "I am," he yelled. "That is where I am. I am at the specialist's private clinic. It is in Santa Monica. But Dad, listen, they have a new treatment, a valve replacement. It can save her. But the insurance is giving us the runaround. They need a deposit right now to start the prep. They won't touch her without it." He was using his wife's life as a bargaining chip for his bar tab. He was monetizing her potential death to pay for his champagne. It was a level of depravity I had not expected even from him. "A deposit," I asked. "How much, son?" "20,000, Blake said. He didn't even hesitate. He rounded up. He wanted pocket money too. $20,000, Dad. I need you to wire it to my personal account right now. I tried to use the joint account, but the bank locked it because of the location change. You know how they are. Please, Dad. Zoe's life depends on it. If we don't pay in 10 minutes, they are going to cancel the surgery." I sat in the ICU looking at the real Zoe who was being prepped for real surgery by real doctors who cared about saving her, not billing her. The rage I felt was cold and sharp like a blade of ice. 20,000, I repeated slowly. That is everything I have, Blake. That is my retirement savings. The money from the farm. I know, Dad. I know, Blake shouted. He sounded desperate, angry that I was hesitating. But this is Zoe. This is your daughter. Do you want her to die because you wanted to hold on to your pennies? I will pay you back, I swear. Next week, once the insurance clears. Just send the money. He was bullying me. He was guilt-tripping an old man he believed was destitute. He was threatening me with my daughter's death to cover his own humiliation. "Okay," I said, my voice trembling with feigned fear. "Okay, son. I will do it. But I don't know how to do the wire on the phone. I have to go to the bank." "No," Blake screamed. "The bank is closed. You have to do it on the app. Just give me your login. I will do it myself. Just give me the numbers." He wanted access. He wanted to drain me dry. I cannot do that. "Blake," I said, "I don't use apps. I am an old man, but wait. I have a checkbook in my truck. I can go to the branch in the morning. Morning will be too late. She will be dead by morning." Blake was losing control. I could hear the panic in his voice, the realization that his lifeline was fraying. "I am sorry, Blake," I said. "I am doing my best. Tell the doctors to wait. Tell them I am good for it. I am Jefferson Moore. My word is my bond. Your word means nothing to them." Blake snarled, his mask slipping completely. "They need cash. You useless old—" He cut himself off. He took a breath. He realized screaming would not get him the money. He needed to pivot. "Okay, Dad. Okay. I am sorry. I am just stressed. Look, do you have a credit card? A debit card? Read me the numbers. I can run it here." I paused. I let the silence stretch until I knew he was checking his phone to see if the call had dropped. "I am at the hospital, Blake," I said, dropping the confused act for just a second. "I am at Cedars-Sinai, in room 402. There was a pause on the line. A long, heavy pause where the only sound was the wind on the ocean and the beep of the monitor in the room. What Blake whispered. "I am at the hospital," I repeated, my voice hardening into steel. "I am looking at Zoe. She is unconscious. She is alone. There is no specialist. There is no clinic in Santa Monica. Dad, And Blake," I continued, my voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice that had commanded fleets of ships and armies of men. "The nurse told me you have not answered your phone in 6 hours. I can explain," Blake stammered. "I went to the wrong building. I am in the car. I am racing there right now. The reception." "Save it," I said. "I know you are not in a car. I can hear the ocean, Blake. I can hear the waves. And I know you are not worried about Zoe. You are worried about a bill for $22,000 that you cannot pay because I froze your cards. Silence. Absolute terrified silence. You froze them, Blake asked, his voice trembling. I own the boat, Blake, I said. The golden horizon. It is mine. The champagne you drank. It is mine. The deck you are standing on. Mine. And the police officers waiting at the dock to greet you for theft of services and fraud. Those are mine too. Dad. Wait, please. Do not call me Dad, I said. You have an hour to get to this hospital. If you are not here when she comes out of surgery, I will make sure the only thing you ever inherit is a prison cell. I hung up the phone. I did not feel triumph. I felt only a grim resolve. The first domino had fallen. Blake was broken, exposed, and terrified. Now he would run. He would run straight into the trap I had set for him. And when he arrived, he would find that the old man he despised was the judge, jury, and executioner of his fate. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the only constant in my world, a mechanical metronome counting down the moments while my daughter fought for every breath. But pressed against my ear, the phone told a different story, a story of wind waves and the desperate, frantic lies of a man backed into a corner. Blake's voice was high and tight, a stark contrast to the smooth, confident baritone he usually employed to charm his way into high society. He was shouting over the background noise, claiming he was at a specialist's clinic, claiming he was fighting for Zoe's life. But I heard the truth. The truth was in the sound of the wind whipping against a microphone. It was in the distant, rhythmic slap of water against a hull. It was in the faint, tinny beat of electronic dance music that hadn't quite been cut off when the yacht went dark. He wasn't in a sterile clinic. He wasn't surrounded by doctors. He was standing on the deck of a boat surrounded by the wreckage of his own arrogance, trying to con an old man he thought was too stupid to know the difference between a hospital and a harbor. The contempt I felt was a physical thing, a cold, heavy stone in my gut. He was using his dying wife as leverage. He was turning her tragedy into his ATM. He thought he was playing me. He thought I was just a senile old fool from the country, easily confused and easily led. He had no idea that he was talking to a man who had negotiated contracts worth more than his entire bloodline would earn in 10 generations. I took a breath. I let my hand tremble slightly as I held the phone a performance for an audience of one. I let my voice crack, pitching it up into the register of a frightened, overwhelmed father. Blake, I stammered. I can barely hear you, son. It sounds like you are outside. Are you sure you are at the clinic? Yes. Yes, I am outside, Blake yelled, his frustration boiling over. I had to step out to get reception. The clinic has thick walls. Listen to me, Dad. We don't have time for this. The doctors are waiting. They need the deposit now. $20,000. Can you send it? Do you have the app? I paused. I let the silence stretch, forcing him to sweat, forcing him to wonder if he had pushed too hard. The app, I asked, my voice weak. I don't know about apps, Blake. I have my checkbook. I have my savings passbook. But the bank is closed, son. It is 3 a.m. No. Blake sounded like he was about to cry. You don't need the bank to be open. Just give me the numbers, the routing number and the account number. I can do it from here. I can set up the transfer. Just read them to me. He was desperate. He was reckless. He was asking for direct access to my accounts, a breach of protocol so severe that any competent fraud investigator would have laughed him out of the room. But he wasn't thinking like a criminal mastermind. He was thinking like a spoiled child who had been told no for the first time in his life. I don't know, Blake, I said, injecting a note of stubborn fear into my voice. That sounds risky. My retirement money? That is all I have. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong, Blake screamed. Do you want Zoe to die? Is that it? Do you want your daughter to die because you are too scared to read some numbers off a piece of paper? She is dying right now, Jefferson, and it will be your fault. There it was. The hook. The guilt. The manipulation. He was willing to lay the death of my daughter at my feet to cover his own bar tab. It was despicable. It was evil. And it was exactly what I needed him to say. Okay, I whispered, sounding defeated. Okay, son, you are right. I cannot let her die. I will do it, but I need to know where to send it. The bank always asks for the address of the recipient for big transfers. Where is this clinic? What is the name? I could hear the relief in his sigh, a sudden release of tension that was almost audible. He thought he had won. He thought he had broken me. It is the Westside Heart Institute, he said, the lie coming smooth and fast now. In Santa Monica, on Wilshire Boulevard, just put that down. Westside Heart Institute. Now the numbers, Dad, please. Westside Heart Institute. I knew every major medical facility in Los Angeles. I knew the board members. I knew the donors. There was no Westside Heart Institute on Wilshire. He was making it up. He was pulling a name out of thin air, desperate to keep the con alive. Westside Heart Institute. I repeated slowly as if writing it down. Okay. And the account number? Just give me yours, Blake snapped. I will pull it from yours. I paused again. I looked at Zoe. Her chest rose and fell. She was still with me. She was still fighting. And I was about to strike the blow that would free her forever. I cannot find my glasses, Blake, I said. I cannot read the small numbers. I have to go to the nurse's station. They have better light. No. Don't hang up, Blake shouted. I will call you back, son, I said. I will call you back in 5 minutes. I promise. Just tell the doctors to wait. Tell them I am coming. I hung up. The silence in the room rushed back in, heavy and suffocating. I stared at the phone in my hand. The recording light was still blinking red. I stopped it. I saved the file. Blake Sterling extortion call. 1. I did not go to the nurse's station. I did not look for my glasses. I dialed a different number. Sloan picked up immediately. Did you get it? She asked. I got it all. I said, my voice dropping the facade of the confused old man returning to the cold steel of the CEO. He demanded $20,000. He claimed he was at a fictional clinic called the Westside Heart Institute. He threatened Zoe's life if I did not pay. He confirmed he is not at Cedars-Sinai. He confirmed he is not with his wife. Excellent, Sloan said. That is fraud, attempted extortion, and abandonment. It is enough to trigger the clause. Do it, I said. Trigger the clause. It was a nuclear option I had buried deep in the trust documents I had set up for Zoe 5 years ago, a failsafe designed for exactly this moment. The unworthy heir clause. It stipulated that if any beneficiary or their spouse was found to be acting in bad faith, committing fraud, or endangering the life of the principal beneficiary, they would be immediately and irrevocably stripped of all rights, titles, and interests in the estate. It effectively disinherited Blake Sterling not just from my money but from Zoe's. It cut him off from the house, the cars, the joint accounts, the insurance policies. It left him with nothing but his name, and by the time I was done, even that would be worthless. I am executing the document now, Sloan said. I will file it with the court electronically within the hour. By sunrise, he will be legally destitute. And Jefferson. Yes, I have also flagged his passport. If he tries to run, he won't get past TSA. Good, I said. I do not want him to run. I want him to come here. I want him to come to me. I hung up the phone. I sat back in the chair and watched my daughter breathe. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Blake Sterling was currently standing on a dock in Marina del Rey, holding a dead phone and a declined credit card waiting for a transfer that would never come. He was about to realize that the old man he thought was a fool was actually the architect of his destruction. He would call back. I knew he would. He would call back screaming. He would call back begging. But I wouldn't answer. I would let him stew in his own panic. I would let him drive across the city, racing against a clock he couldn't see, terrified of the consequences he couldn't imagine. And when he finally burst through those doors, sweating and desperate, expecting to find a confused old man and a checkbook, he would find me. And he would find that the checkbook was closed and the reckoning had begun. The sea breeze at the marina had been replaced by the stale, recycled air of the car, but the storm inside Blake Sterling's mind was just beginning to rage. I watched the GPS dot on my phone screen leave the marina moving erratically, accelerating too fast, braking too hard. He was driving the Porsche Panamera that my daughter's hard work had paid for, fleeing the scene of his humiliation, not to rush to her bedside, but to find a place to scream. I sat in the corner of the ICU, the shadows of the room wrapping around me like a shroud. I placed the wireless earbud into my ear and tapped the screen to activate the audio feed. 6 months ago, I had paid a mechanic $500 to install a high-fidelity listening device behind the rearview mirror of that car. I had done it because I saw the way Zoe flinched when he raised his voice. I had done it because a father's instinct is rarely wrong. Today, that investment was about to pay a dividend of pure, unadulterated truth. The audio crackled to life. The first sound was a guttural, animalistic scream. Blake was alone in the car, and the facade of the charming socialite had shattered completely. Stupid, stupid piece of plastic. I heard the sound of something hard hitting the dashboard. He was likely throwing the declined credit cards. "Do you know who I am?" he shouted at the empty air. "I am Blake Sterling. You don't decline me, you don't turn off my music." The engine roared as he floored the accelerator. I could hear the tires screeching on the asphalt. He was reckless, dangerous, a child throwing a tantrum with a 2-ton weapon. He dialed a number. The Bluetooth system picked it up, broadcasting the ringing tone directly into my ear. "Pick up Tiffany. Pick up, you useless." The call connected. "Blake?" The woman's voice was sharp, annoyed. "Where did you go?" The captain just kicked everyone off. It was humiliating. "It was a mistake," Blake yelled, his voice cracking. "A banking error. My father-in-law, that senile old fool, he must have messed up the transfer. I told him to wire the funds yesterday. I sat stone still. Senile. Fool. He was blaming me. He was using the man he thought was a simple peasant as the scapegoat for his own failures." "I don't care, Blake," Tiffany said. "You said you owned the boat. You said you were rich. My friends are laughing at me. Don't call me until you fix this." The line went dead. "Bitch," Blake screamed. "You are nothing without me. Nothing." He swerved. I heard the horn of another car blaring as he cut someone off. He was driving toward West Hollywood. Toward the apartment he kept for his late-night dalliances. He wasn't coming to the hospital. Zoe was dying and he was going to his nest to lick his wounds. And then the monologue began. The true face of the devil revealed itself in the privacy of that leather-clad interior. "I should have left her months ago," he muttered, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "Zoe, useless, sick Zoe. Always in the hospital, always whining. Oh, Blake, hold my hand. Oh, Blake, I'm scared. I am sick of it." My hand gripped the armrest of the chair so hard the plastic creaked. "She is a millstone," he continued, dragging me down. If she had just died on the table last year, I would be free. I would have the insurance. I would have the house. I wouldn't be dealing with this poverty. He paused, breathing heavily. "And her father," he spat the word like a curse. "Jefferson. That dirty, uneducated field hand, walking around in his Goodwill jacket like he deserves to breathe the same air as me. He looks at me with those dead eyes. He thinks he knows something. He knows nothing. He is a peasant, a dirt digger." The racism wasn't surprising, but hearing it spoken aloud with such casual, vitriolic hate was a shock to the system. He didn't just think I was poor. He thought I was less than human because of the color of my skin. He thought his whiteness, combined with the money he stole from my daughter, made him a god. "I will trick him," Blake said, a cruel laugh bubbling up in his throat. "I will get him to sign the house over to me before the funeral. I will tell him it's for tax purposes. The old idiot will sign anything with an X. And then I will put him in the cheapest nursing home I can find and let him rot." The feed went silent as he parked the car. I took the earbud out. My hands were trembling, not with age, not with fear, but with a cold, focused rage that felt like ice water in my veins. He wanted to bury me. He wanted to erase my daughter. He wanted to take everything we had built and use it to fund his life of mediocrity. The door to the ICU room hissed open. Dr. Aris walked in. The gravity on his face told me everything before he even spoke. "Mr. Moore," he said softly. I stood up. I felt tall. I felt strong. The grief was still there, but it had been forged into armor. "What is it?" I asked. "The valve has ruptured completely," Dr. Aris said. "We cannot do a repair. We have to do a full replacement, a mechanical valve. But her heart is weak. The trauma of the surgery, the risk of mortality is over 60%. He looked at me with sympathy. "If she survives, she will have a long recovery. If she doesn't," he trailed off. "We need the consent," he said. "The specific consent for the transplant. It is a different procedure than what we discussed. We need the husband. I looked at the clock. It was almost 4 in the morning. Blake was at his mistress's apartment crying about his declined credit card. He isn't here, I said. Then we cannot operate, the doctor said. Legally, without his consent or a court order, my hands are tied unless what? Unless he signs a waiver, or unless he is proven unavailable or incompetent. I looked at the phone in my hand. I had the recording. I had the proof of his abandonment. But using it now would take time. It would involve lawyers and judges. Zoe didn't have time. I needed him here. I needed him to sign. And I knew exactly how to make him do it. He wanted her dead. He wanted the insurance. If I told him she was going to survive, he might drag his feet. He might look for a second opinion just to delay. But if I told him she was dying, if I told him the surgery was a desperate Hail Mary pass that would likely kill her, he would run here. He would sprint to sign that paper. He would sign her death warrant thinking it was his lottery ticket. Doctor, I said, get the papers ready. He is on his way. He is, yes, I said. I am going to make him an offer he cannot refuse. I walked out into the hallway. I dialed Blake's number. I didn't tremble. I didn't hesitate. I was the spider and he was the fly, buzzing with greed and hate, flying straight into the web. Hello, Blake answered on the first ring. He sounded out of breath, likely from running up the stairs to his lover's door. Blake, I said, my voice heavy with fake sorrow. It's bad. The doctor says... He says she isn't going to make it. What? Blake asked. I could hear the shift in his tone. The annoyance vanished, replaced by a sharp, predatory alertness. They need to try a risky surgery, I said. But the doctor said... He said the chances are almost zero. She will likely die on the table. On the table, Blake repeated. Yes, I said, but they need you to sign. They can't let her go without your signature. I'm coming, Blake said instantly. I'm 5 minutes away. Tell them to prep the room. Tell them I'm coming to say goodbye. He hung up. I stared at the phone. He was coming to say goodbye. He was coming to watch her die. I walked back into the room and sat down in the dark. I watched the door. I waited for the devil to show his face. And when he did, I was going to make sure he saw exactly who he was messing with. The elevator doors at the end of the intensive care unit hallway slid open with a heavy mechanical grind that shattered the early morning silence. It was 5 o'clock. The hospital was in that strange, suspended state between the deep quiet of the night shift and the chaotic energy of the morning rounds. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sickly pale yellow glow on the waxed floors. I sat in the corner of the waiting area, my body angled so I was half hidden by a large potted fern. I wanted to see him before he saw me. I wanted to gauge his performance before he realized he had an audience. Blake Sterling stepped out of the elevator. He paused for a moment, adjusting his jacket and running a hand through his disheveled hair. He looked like a man who had been through a war, but not the kind fought in hospitals. His white linen shirt, the same one he had worn on the yacht, was wrinkled and stained with what looked like red wine. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with dark circles that spoke of a hangover rather than grief. He took a deep breath, steeling himself, and then he put on the mask. His shoulders slumped. His face twisted into a practiced grimace of sorrow. He began to walk down the hall, his pace urgent but heavy, the very picture of a devastated husband rushing to his dying wife's side. As he got closer, the smell hit me. It was a wave of aggressive, expensive cologne applied heavily in a desperate attempt to mask the underlying stench of stale gin sea salt and the sweat of a man who had spent the last few hours screaming in his car. It was the scent of a lie. He spotted me. For a split second, his eyes narrowed in annoyance, the look he usually reserved for when I visited their penthouse and sat on the good furniture. But then the mask slipped back into place. "Dad," he choked out. He rushed toward me, his arms wide open. He engulfed me in a hug that felt as genuine as a $3 bill. His body was tense, vibrating with a nervous energy that he was trying to pass off as anxiety. I let him hold me for a second, feeling the dampness of his shirt against my cheek. I fought the urge to shove him away, to slam him against the wall and demand he tell me where he had really been. Instead, I let my body go limp, playing the part of the defeated, overwhelmed father. "I am so glad you are here," I said, my voice trembling. I did not know what to do. Blake pulled back, keeping his hands on my shoulders. He looked me in the eye, summoning moisture to his own. "I am so sorry, Jefferson." The traffic from Santa Monica was a nightmare, and the specialist kept me waiting for hours. But I am here now. How is she? Is she still with us? The lie was so smooth, so practiced. He had probably rehearsed it in the mirror of his mistress's bathroom. She is alive, I said, but barely. Blake nodded, biting his lip. I could see the gears turning behind his eyes. He was calculating. He was wondering if she was conscious. He was wondering if she could speak. Can I see her? He asked. Not yet, I said. The doctors are prepping the room. They are waiting for us. They are waiting for you. I led him toward the small consultation room next to the nurse's station. Dr. Eris was waiting inside, standing by a small round table covered in paperwork. The doctor looked tired, his face grave. He knew the part he had to play. I had briefed him. I had told him that my son-in-law was hesitant about the cost and that we needed to emphasize the medical necessity to get him to sign. Dr. Eris did not know about the yacht or the fraud, but he knew a bad husband when he saw one. Mr. Sterling, Dr. Eris said, extending a hand. We spoke on the phone. Blake shook the doctor's hand firmly. Yes, thank you for waiting. My father-in-law told me the situation is dire. It is critical, Dr. Eris corrected. As I explained to Mr. Moore, Zoe's heart valve has suffered a catastrophic failure. The repair we hoped for is impossible. We need to perform a full replacement immediately. We need to put her on bypass, stop her heart, cut out the damaged tissue, and install a mechanical valve. Blake nodded solemnly, acting the part of the concerned intellectual. I understand. Do whatever you have to do. There is a problem, Dr. Eris said. He picked up a thick stack of papers clipped to a board. The procedure carries significant risk. Given her current state of weakness, the statistical probability of her surviving the anesthesia and the trauma of the surgery is low. We estimate a mortality risk of 60 to 70%. I watched Blake's face closely. I saw the micro-expression, the tiny flicker of muscle at the corner of his mouth. It was not fear. It was relief. It was hope. 60% chance of death. Those were winning odds for a man who needed a life insurance payout to cover a $22,000 bar tab and $100,000 in gambling debts. He looked down at the floor, feigning devastation. Oh, God, he whispered. That is terrible. But if we do not operate, Dr. Eris continued, the mortality rate is 100%. She will not survive the morning. Blake looked up. His eyes were dry, but his voice was thick with fake emotion. Then we have no choice. We have to try. I cannot lose her. Then I need your signature, Dr. Eris said. He slid the clipboard across the table. This is the informed consent for the surgery, the anesthesia, and the use of experimental coagulants, Dr. Eris explained. And this section here covers the financial responsibility and the assignment of decision-making authority in the event of intraoperative complications. Blake reached for the pen. He did not even look at me. He was focused entirely on the paper, seeing it as the golden ticket that would solve all his problems. I reached out and put my hand over his, stopping him. Blake. Wait, I said. He looked at me, irritation flashing in his eyes. What is it, Dad? We have to hurry. Are you sure? I asked, injecting a note of terrified hesitation into my voice. The doctor said she might die on the table. If she dies, I cannot bear it. Maybe we should wait. Maybe we should get a second opinion. Maybe there is a medicine. There is no time for medicine. Jefferson Blake snapped, his voice sharp and commanding. He pulled his hand free from mine. Do you want to kill her with your indecision? I am her husband. I have to make the hard choices. He was performing for the doctor now, playing the strong patriarch dealing with a weak, emotional old relative. But the papers, I stammered. They are so long. Should we read them? My lawyer friend told me you should always read before you sign. Blake laughed, a short, derisive sound. Your lawyer friend from the farm, Dad, this is standard hospital admin. I have signed a dozen of these for her over the years. It just says we promise not to sue them if they try their best. He looked at Dr. Eris for confirmation. Right, Doctor, standard procedure. Dr. Eris said, his face a mask of professional neutrality. It authorizes the surgery and outlines the protocols for guardianship and asset management during the recovery period. Blake did not hear the second half of the sentence. He stopped listening after the word surgery. He was looking at the bold text at the top of the page, high-risk procedure, consent to treat. He did not look at the bottom of the second page. He did not see the paragraph titled Addendum, a Contingent Transfer of Guardianship and Asset Control. He did not see the clause that stated quite clearly in legal English that by signing this document, the signatory acknowledged that any refusal to pay for necessary medical costs would constitute an act of abandonment, immediately transferring all medical and financial power of attorney regarding the patient to the secondary signatory Jefferson Moore. He did not see it because he did not care. He saw a 60% chance of a funeral. He saw a house he could sell. He saw a portfolio of stocks he could liquidate. He saw freedom. "I will sign," Blake said firmly. "I am signing right now." He pressed the pen to the paper. The scratching sound was loud in the quiet room. He signed his name with a flourish, a big looping signature that took up more space than necessary. Blake Sterling. He flipped the page. He signed the anesthesia waiver. Blake Sterling. He flipped to the addendum. The trap. The document that Sloan had drafted and emailed to the hospital legal team just an hour ago, disguised as a standard liability waiver. He did not even pause. He did not scan a single line. He signed, Blake Sterling. He handed the clipboard back to Dr. Aris. "There. It is done. Save my wife, doctor." Dr. Aris took the clipboard. He looked at the signature. Then he looked at me. There was the slightest nod of his head. The legal chain was forged. The shackles were on. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," Dr. Aris said. "We will take her in now. It will be a long surgery. You should wait in the family area." Blake let out a long sigh, running his hands through his hair. "I will wait," he said dramatically. "I won't leave this building until I know." He turned to me. "Come on, Dad. Let's get some coffee. I left my wallet in the car in my rush, so you will have to buy." He patted my shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be comforting but felt patronizing. He thought he was in control. He thought he had just authorized a procedure that would make him a rich widower. He had no idea he had just signed away his entire life. I stood up slowly, leaning heavily on the table as if I needed the support. "Okay, son," I said. "I will buy the coffee." But what Blake asked, already turning toward the door, checking his phone, probably texting his mistress that the problem was being solved. The doctor said something else, I said. "Before you came in." Blake stopped. He turned back, a frown creasing his forehead. "What?" He said, "The medicine they need, the special coagulant to stop the bleeding. It is very expensive. He said the insurance denied it because it is experimental." Blake's eyes narrowed. "How expensive?" $50,000, I said. Blake recoiled as if I had slapped him. 50,000. For medicine. That is robbery. They need it before they start, I said. Or they use the generic stuff. But the generic stuff, the doctor said it increases the risk of stroke. Blake waved his hand dismissively. 50,000 is ridiculous. We don't have that kind of liquid cash sitting around. Just tell them to use the normal stuff. Zoe is strong. She will be fine. He was doing it again, cheaping out on her life, increasing the odds of her death to save money he didn't even have. "But Blake," I pleaded, "if she has a stroke—" "She won't have a stroke," Blake hissed. "Stop being so dramatic. We are not paying $50,000 for some fancy aspirin. Use the generic. End of discussion." He walked out of the room, heading toward the waiting area, confident that his decision was final. He was the husband. He held the purse strings. I watched him go. I felt a cold, hard smile touch my lips. He had just walked right into the second phase of the trap. He had refused to pay for a critical medical expense. He had just activated the clause he hadn't read. Dr. Aris was still standing there, holding the clipboard. "Did you hear that, doctor?" I asked. "I heard it, Mr. Moore," Dr. Aris said. "He refused the recommended treatment due to cost." "Good," I said. I reached into the deep inner pocket of my worn canvas jacket. I bypassed the wallet with the maxed-out credit cards I kept for show. I reached deeper into the lining where I kept the pouch I had brought from the safe in my hotel room. I pulled out 5 stacks of bills. Fresh, crisp $100 notes bound in bank straps, $10,000 in each stack, $50,000 in cash. I set them on the table next to the clipboard. The sound was a heavy, solid thud. "Use the best medicine, doctor," I said. "I am paying for it." Dr. Aris looked at the money. He looked at my frayed cuffs. He looked at my face. He didn't ask questions. He understood that the man standing in front of him was not the man his son-in-law thought he was. "I will take this down to billing myself," Dr. Aris said. "And Mr. Moore?" "Yes. The surgery will go well. I will make sure of it." I nodded. I knew he would. I walked out of the consultation room and headed toward the waiting area. Blake was sitting in a corner, scrolling through his phone, looking bored. He looked up as I approached. "Did you tell them?" he asked. "About the generic medicine, I told them," I said. "Good," Blake said. He put his feet up on the chair opposite him. "Now we wait." "God, I need a drink." He closed his eyes, resting his head back against the wall. He looked peaceful. He looked like a man who had handled his business. I sat down across from him. I watched him. I waited for the moment when he would open his eyes and see the receipt I was holding in my hand. I waited for the moment when he would realize that the old man from the farm had just dropped $50,000 in cash without blinking. The hypocrite had returned, but he wasn't going to stay for long. I was about to introduce him to the landlord. The silence in the waiting room was a heavy, suffocating blanket that smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. Blake had settled into a chair in the corner, his long legs stretched out in front of him, scrolling through his phone with the casual indifference of a man waiting for an oil change rather than his wife's heart surgery. I watched him from my seat across the room. I watched the way his thumb moved rhythmically over the screen, likely deleting photos from the yacht or texting lies to his mistress to buy himself more time. He looked up only when the double doors swung open and Dr. Aris stepped out. The surgeon looked grim. He held a clipboard in one hand and a billing tablet in the other. He walked straight toward us, his steps echoing on the linoleum floor. Blake sat up, putting on his mask of concern again. "Is it over?" he asked, his voice pitching up into a performance of anxiety. "Did she make it?" "The surgery has not started yet," Dr. Aris said, his tone clipped and professional. "We are prepping the theater now. However, we have hit an administrative roadblock regarding the medication I mentioned earlier. The hospital pharmacy has flagged the request for the coagulant. Because it is experimental and not covered by your insurance plan, the system requires an upfront payment before they can release the doses. We cannot open the patient up without it. The risk of hemorrhage is too high." Blake frowned, an expression of annoyance crossing his face before he smoothed it away. "I told you, doctor, we cannot afford $50,000 out of pocket. That is absurd. Just use the standard medication. People have heart surgery every day without experimental drugs. Zoe is strong. She will be fine with the regular stuff." Dr. Aris looked at Blake with a gaze that would have withered a lesser man. "Mr. Sterling, the standard medication has a failure rate of 15% in patients with Zoe's specific condition. The experimental drug reduces that risk to less than 1%. We are talking about a significant difference in survival probability. If we use the standard drug and she bleeds out on the table, there will be nothing I can do." Blake stood up, trying to use his height to intimidate the doctor. "Listen to me," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "I know you doctors love to push expensive treatments to pad the bill. But I am not an idiot. I know how this works. You are trying to upsell me. We do not have $50,000 liquid. Even if we wanted to pay, we couldn't. All our assets are tied up in investments." He was lying. His assets weren't tied up. They were non-existent. He was broke and he was willing to gamble with his wife's life because he didn't want to admit he couldn't pay the bill. "So your decision is final?" Dr. Aris asked, his pen hovering over the tablet. "You are refusing the recommended treatment knowing the risks." "Yes," Blake snapped. "I am refusing. It is in God's hands now. If it is her time, it is her time. We cannot bankrupt the family for a 1% difference. It is irresponsible. It is in God's hands." The hypocrisy made bile rise in my throat. He invoked God while standing in shoes that cost more than my first car shoes paid for by the woman he was sentencing to death. He turned to me, seeking validation for his cruelty. "You understand, right, Dad?" he said, looking at me with those cold, empty eyes. "You are a practical man. You know the value of $1. $50,000 for medicine is crazy. Zoe wouldn't want us to throw money away like that. She would want us to be smart." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had partied on a yacht while his wife was dying. I looked at the man who had just put a price tag on my daughter's life and decided it was too high. The time for the act was over. The time for the confused old man from the farm had passed. I stood up. I didn't push myself up using the armrest like I usually did. I didn't groan or hold my back. I stood up straight, unfolding my full 6'2" frame until I was looking down at Blake. The air around me seemed to change. The temperature dropped. The fatigue that had plagued me since I landed in Los Angeles evaporated, replaced by a surge of adrenaline and cold, hard power. "No, Blake," I said. My voice was different. The southern drawl was still there, but the tremor was gone. The hesitation was gone. It was the voice that had commanded boardrooms and negotiated labor strikes. It was a voice of absolute authority. "I do not understand. And Zoe is not going to die because you are cheap." Blake blinked, taking a half step back, confused by the sudden change in my demeanor. "Dad, what are you—" I ignored him. I turned to Dr. Aris. I reached down to the battered canvas bag I had kept at my feet since I arrived. It was an old military duffel stained with oil and dirt, the kind of bag a man uses to carry tools or dirty laundry. Blake had sneered at it earlier. He thought it contained my old man clothes. I unzipped the main compartment. The sound of the heavy brass zipper was loud in the quiet room. I reached inside, bypassing the change of clothes and the toiletries. My hand closed around the heavy vacuum-sealed brick at the bottom. I pulled it out and slammed it onto the small table between us. The sound was a solid, heavy thud that echoed off the walls. It was not tools, it was not laundry, it was cash. 5 stacks of $100 bills, fresh from the Federal Reserve, bound in bank straps that were crisp and unbroken. $10,000 in each stack, $50,000 total. Blake's eyes went wide. His mouth fell open. He stared at the money as if I had just pulled a live rabbit out of a hat. He looked at the frayed canvas bag. He looked at my worn work jacket. He looked back at the money. His brain could not compute the image. It broke his reality. "I pay," I said to Dr. Aris. "Use the best medicine. Do not spare a single expense. If you need more, you come to me." Dr. Aris looked at the money, then at me. He nodded once, a sharp, respectful movement. He understood. He didn't ask questions. He picked up the stacks, verified the bands, and tucked them securely under his clipboard. "I will take this to the cashier immediately, Mr. Moore," the doctor said. "We will start the surgery in 10 minutes. "Thank you, doctor," I said. "Save my girl." Dr. Aris turned and walked briskly back through the double doors. The silence he left behind was electric. Blake was still staring at the spot where the money had been. He looked like he had been hit in the face with a shovel. He slowly raised his eyes to meet mine. The contempt was gone, replaced by a mixture of shock, confusion, and a sudden sharp greed. "Dad," he whispered. Where did you get that?" I zipped the bag back up slowly, deliberately. I smoothed the canvas. I sat back down, crossing my legs, looking at him with a calm that I knew was terrifying him. "That is $50,000, Blake stammered. "In cash. You carry that around in a gym bag. Are you crazy? Is it illegal? Did you find it?" His mind was racing through the possibilities that fit his worldview. I was poor. Therefore, the money had to be stolen or found or the result of some desperate criminal act. He could not conceive of a world where I simply had it. I looked him dead in the eye. I let a small, dry smile touch the corner of my lips. It was a smile devoid of warmth. "It is corn money, Blake," I said. "Corn money." He repeated, his voice high and incredulous. "Yes," I said. "We had a good harvest this year. The prices were high. I sold the Northfield's yield last Tuesday. I brought it with me because I don't trust banks in the city. It was a lie. A ridiculous, bold-faced lie. I hadn't grown corn in 40 years. The money came from my private safe, the dividends of a logistics empire that moved millions of tons of freight every year. But it was a lie that fit perfectly into the box Blake had built for me. To him, I was a farmer. Farmers had cash. Farmers sold crops. It was plausible enough to be true, but absurd enough to be insulting. "Corn," Blake whispered. "You made 50 grand selling corn." "I made more than that," I said, leaning back in the chair. "A lot more. Farming pays well if you know what you're doing. You should try working with your hands sometime, son. It clears the mind." Blake looked at me with a new expression. It wasn't respect. It was hunger. The wheels in his head were spinning so fast I could almost hear them. He was recalculating everything. The old man wasn't just a burden. The old man was a piggy bank. A piggy bank that walked around with $50,000 in a duffel bag. His posture changed. He sat up straighter. He licked his lips. The arrogance returned, but now it was mixed with a predatory charm. "Wow, Dad," he said, letting out a breathless laugh. "I had no idea. I mean, you always live so simply. I just assumed, well, you know." Times are tough for everyone. Times are tough for people who spend money they do not have, I said simply. Blake flinched, but he recovered quickly. He leaned in, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. You know, Dad, that is amazing. Really amazing. It is so good that you could step up for Zoe. I was so worried. I was going to sell my watch, you know. I was going to do whatever it took. But the bank, the transfer times, it is all so slow. Cash is king, right? He was pivoting. He was trying to get back on my good side. He was trying to figure out how much more was in the bag. Right, I said. Cash is king. He looked at the bag again. His eyes lingered on the zipper. So he said, trying to sound casual, Is that all of it? Or did you have a really good harvest? I stared at him until he looked away. I have enough, Blake, I said. I have enough to take care of my family. The implication hung in the air. My family, not him. Blake swallowed hard. He nodded, tapping his fingers nervously on his knee. He was confused. He was suspicious, but mostly he was greedy. He had just seen a flash of gold in the pan, and he was already wondering how to steal the whole mine. You know, Dad, he said, a slick smile sliding onto his face. We should talk later, about investments. I know a lot about finance. If you have cash sitting around, you shouldn't keep it in a bag. It is dangerous. I could help you manage it. Multiply it. I looked at the man who couldn't even pay his own bar tab. I bet you could, I said. I bet you could make it disappear like magic. Blake laughed, thinking I was joking. You are funny, Dad. Seriously, though, we will talk. After Zoe is okay, we will talk business. He leaned back satisfied. He thought he had found a new angle. He thought he had just discovered that his golden goose wasn't his dying wife, but her hick father. I watched him plan my financial ruin in his head. I let him dream. Because the higher he climbed in his imagination, the harder the fall would be when I kicked the ladder out from under him. The surgery had started. The clock was ticking, and Blake Sterling was running out of time. I excused myself from the waiting room, telling Blake that I needed to use the restroom. It was a simple lie, but a necessary one. I left my battered canvas jacket draped over the back of the plastic chair. To the casual observer, it looked like a careless mistake, the forgetfulness of an overwhelmed old man leaving his personal belongings unguarded. But it was not a mistake. It was an invitation. I knew Blake Sterling better than he knew himself. I knew that the sight of $50,000 in cash had not satisfied his curiosity. It had inflamed it. He was a man who measured the world in what he could take from it, and I had just shown him a glimpse of a reservoir he never knew existed. I walked down the hallway toward the restrooms, but I did not go inside. Instead, I stopped around the corner, standing in the shadows of a vending machine alcove where the reflection in the glass doors of the intensive care unit entrance gave me a perfect view of the waiting area. I watched him. I waited. It took less than 30 seconds. Blake looked around the room, scanning for nurses or security guards. When he was sure he was alone, he lunged for my jacket. He did not hesitate. There was no guilt in his movements, only a frantic, desperate greed. He plunged his hands into the pockets, digging through the lining, searching for more cash, searching for bank books, searching for anything that would explain the money. He pulled out a handful of old receipts from a feed store in Georgia. He tossed them aside. He pulled out a roll of peppermint candies. He threw them on the floor. He was getting frustrated. He wanted the source. He wanted the key to the vault. Then his hand froze. He had found the inner pocket, the one secured with a small brass button. He undid it with trembling fingers. He reached inside and pulled out a small leather case. It was not the cheap faux leather wallet I carried for show. It was a custom-made card case crafted from Italian calfskin, sleek and heavy. It was an artifact from my other life, a life I kept hidden from parasites like him. Blake opened the case. He pulled out a single card. Even from 20 feet away, I could see the way the light caught the edge of it. It was not paper. It was a heavy black cardstock embossed with gold leaf. It was the kind of business card that cost more than the shirt Blake was wearing. He stared at it. He squinted, as if he could not believe what his eyes were telling him. I knew exactly what it said. I had designed it myself 30 years ago. Jefferson Moore, founder and CEO, Moore Global Logistics. Blake stood there in the middle of the hospital waiting room holding that card like it was a live grenade. His mouth opened and closed. He looked at the jacket again, the dirty, worn fabric that he had mocked 1,000 times. He looked back at the card. The cognitive dissonance was short-circuiting his brain. He could not reconcile the image of the peasant father-in-law with the reality of the corporate titan. He fumbled for his phone, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. He typed with furious speed. I knew what he was doing. He was typing my name into Google. He was typing in the name of the company. I leaned against the vending machine, crossing my arms. I counted down the seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Blake dropped into the chair as if his legs had been cut out from under him. He stared at his phone screen, his face draining of all color. He was reading the biography on the Forbes list. He was reading the articles about the logistics empire that moved freight across 6 continents. He was reading about the acquisition of the shipping lines, the rail networks, the air cargo fleets. He was reading about the net worth that was estimated in the billions, not millions. And then he saw it. I saw his eyes widen until they were almost perfectly round. He had likely found the article about the subsidiary companies. He had found the name Poseidon Ventures. He had connected the dots, the yacht, the Golden Horizon, the boat he had been partying on just hours ago, the boat he had been kicked off of. It was mine. He realized in that moment that he had been stealing pennies from a man who owned the bank. He realized that every insult he had hurled at me, every sneer, every condescending remark about my simple ways had been absorbed by a man who could buy and sell his entire existence before breakfast. I watched the emotions play across his face like a storm front. First there was shock. Then there was terror. For a moment he looked like he might vomit. He looked at the door of the ICU where his wife lay dying, and he realized the magnitude of his mistake. He had treated the daughter of a billionaire like garbage, but then something else happened. Something repulsive and predictable. The fear faded, the shock evaporated, and in their place came a slow, creeping smile. It was not a smile of relief. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated entitlement. His eyes narrowed. He looked at the card again, and he didn't look scared anymore. He looked angry. He looked furious. He slammed his hand down on the armrest of the chair. He started muttering to himself, his lips moving in a rapid, angry rhythm. He lied to me. I could read the words on his lips. He lied to me. He wasn't thinking about his crimes. He wasn't thinking about his infidelity or his cruelty. He was thinking about the money he felt he had been denied. He was thinking that I had tricked him by not giving him everything he wanted. He was thinking that he was the victim of a massive deception. He stood up and began to pace the small waiting area. He looked like a caged tiger pacing back and forth, his energy manic and dangerous. He was doing the math. If the old man was worth billions, then the $50,000 for the surgery was nothing. It was pocket change. It meant there was more, so much more. He stopped pacing. He pulled out his phone again. He didn't call me. He dialed a number I didn't recognize. He held the phone to his ear, his posture aggressive, his free hand chopping the air as he spoke. I needed to hear him. I needed to know his next move. I pushed off the wall and walked silently down the hallway, moving closer to the corner. The hospital was quiet enough that his voice carried. Pick up, come on, pick up. He paused, waiting. Then he started talking fast, his voice a harsh whisper that echoed in the empty corridor. Mitch, it is me. Shut up and listen. You are not going to believe this. The old man, Jefferson. He is not a farmer. He is a whale, a massive whale. He paused, listening to the person on the other end. No, I am serious. I found his card. I Googled him. Moore Global Logistics. Look it up. He is worth billions. Mitch Billions. And he has been playing us this whole time. He has been walking around in rags, acting like he is broke while he sits on a fortune. He laughed a sound that was jagged and ugly. Yeah, I know. That is what I'm saying. The yacht was his. The card getting declined. It was him. He was toying with me. He knew everything. He started pacing again, walking toward the window, his back to me. Forget the will, Mitch. Forget the inheritance. If Zoe dies, I get nothing compared to what he has. And if he has that kind of money, he probably has a trust set up that cuts me out anyway. He is not stupid. He played the long game. He stopped. He turned and looked at his reflection in the dark glass. We need to change the plan. I don't want the house anymore. I don't want the insurance. That is small potatoes. I want a payout. A settlement. He listened again, nodding his head vigorously. Exactly. Extortion. He is here right now. He thinks I am just his dumb son-in-law. He doesn't know I found the card. We have leverage, Mitch. We have Zoe. My blood ran cold. He was talking about using my daughter as a bargaining chip, not for her life, but for a payday. I am the husband, he hissed into the phone. I have the medical power of attorney. I signed the paper, but I can revoke it. I can stop the surgery. I can pull the plug, or I can threaten to. He laughed again. If he wants his precious daughter to wake up, he is going to have to write me a check. A big one. 5 million, maybe 10. He won't miss it. He will pay it to keep me quiet. He will pay it to get me out of their lives. He paused, listening to his lawyer's advice. Yeah, come down here. Bring the papers. Draft a non-disclosure agreement and a settlement for divorce. I am going to sell him his daughter back. And then I am going to take that money and disappear. I will be on a beach in Rio before the ink is dry. He hung up the phone. He stood there for a moment looking at the screen, a look of triumph on his face. He thought he had found the winning move. He thought he had turned the tables. He thought he could outsmart Jefferson Moore. I stepped back into the shadows, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm of war drums. He wanted to play a game of leverage. He wanted to threaten the thing I loved most in this world. He had made a fatal miscalculation. He assumed I was a man who paid ransoms. He did not know that I was a man who eliminated kidnappers. He put the card back in my jacket pocket, smoothing the fabric down, trying to make it look untouched. He sat back down in the chair, composing his face, putting the mask of the grieving husband back on. But it didn't fit as well this time. The greed was shining through the cracks. I waited a full minute, giving him time to settle. Then I walked back around the corner, my boots heavy on the floor. I walked into the waiting area, rubbing my hands together as if I had just washed them. Sorry that took so long, son, I said, my voice mild. Old bladder? Blake looked up at me. He smiled. It was the smile of a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. No problem, Dad, he said. Everything is fine. I was just thinking about what I asked, sitting down across from him, about the future, he said, his eyes locking onto mine, about how things are going to change. I nodded. Yes, I said. Things are definitely going to change. I looked at the jacket draped over the chair. I knew the card was back inside. I knew he knew. The secret was out. The masquerade was over. But he didn't know that I knew he knew. And that gave me the advantage. He was waiting for his lawyer. He was waiting to spring his trap. He was going to try to sell me my own daughter's life. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes, feigning exhaustion. Let's just pray she makes it through the surgery, I said. Oh, she will make it, Blake said, his voice dripping with a new, sinister confidence. She has to. She is very valuable to us. I let the comment hang in the air. I let him think he was the predator. I let him think he had won. Because when you hunt a wolf, you don't shoot it when it is hiding. You wait until it bares its teeth. You wait until it lunges, and then you put it down. Blake Sterling had just bared his teeth. And I was ready. The double doors of the intensive care unit waiting area swung open with a violence that made the receptionist jump. Blake Sterling strode in, not like a grieving husband, but like a conqueror returning to claim his spoils. He was no longer alone. Flanking him was a man in a cheap suit carrying a battered leather briefcase, a man whose shifting eyes and nervous sweat marked him as the kind of lawyer you hired from a billboard near a bail bonds office. Blake had shed his skin of sorrow. The tears were gone. The slump in his shoulders had vanished. He walked with the chest-out swagger of a man who believed he held a royal flush. He stopped directly in front of me, blocking the fluorescent light, casting a long shadow over my chair. I know who you are, Jeff, he said, his voice dripping with a toxic mixture of triumph and disdain. He didn't call me Dad. He didn't call me Sir. He used the name he thought made us equals. I looked up slowly from the floor. I did not stand. I did not blink. I simply waited. You are not a farmer, Blake spat. You are Jefferson Moore, Moore Global Logistics. I saw the card. I checked the registry. You are worth billions. You have been playing us for fools for 5 years, walking around in these rags, acting like you were counting pennies while you sat on a mountain of gold. His lawyer stepped forward, clearing his throat. Mr. Moore, my client, has informed me of the significant deception regarding your assets. However, that is a matter for civil court. We are here to discuss the immediate medical situation of Mrs. Sterling. Blake cut him off with a sharp wave of his hand. Shut up, Mitch. I will handle this. He leaned down, getting into my face. I could smell the stale alcohol on his breath mixed with the mint of a breath strip. Here is how this works, Jeff. I am the husband. I am the legal next of kin. I hold the medical power of attorney. Zoe is unconscious. She cannot speak. That means I speak for her. I decide what happens next. I decide if the surgery continues or if we stop. I decide if she stays on the ventilator or if we pull the plug. My heart hammered against my ribs, a slow, heavy war drum. He was threatening to kill my daughter, not out of mercy, but out of greed. He was holding her life ransom. "What do you want, Blake?" I asked, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "I want $10 million, Blake whispered. "A settlement. A transfer. Right now. You wire it to an offshore account Mitch has set up. Once the money clears, I sign whatever you want. I sign the divorce papers. I sign the custody of the house. I walk away, and you never see me again. You get your daughter back alive. And if I don't," I asked. Blake straightened up. He adjusted his cuffs. "Then I exercise my rights. I tell the doctors that I do not believe the surgery is in her best interest. I tell them to stop. I tell them to remove life support. I let nature take its course. And you watch her die knowing you could have saved her with the change in your pocket. It was the ultimate gamble, the ultimate cruelty." He was betting that my love for Zoe was greater than my hatred for him. He was right about that. But he was wrong about everything else. I looked at the clock on the wall. The second hand swept past the 12. It was exactly 6 in the morning. "You are a very stupid man, Blake," I said softly. Blake's face darkened. "Do not test me, old man. I have the power here." Mitch gave him the account number. I did not look at the paper Mitch tried to hand me. I looked past them toward the elevator bank at the end of the hall. The light above the center car dinged. The doors slid open. 3 people stepped out. In the lead was a woman in a charcoal power suit sharp enough to cut glass. Her heels clicked on the linoleum with the rhythm of a firing squad. It was Sloan. Flanking her were 2 uniformed officers from the Los Angeles Police Department and a man in a white coat who I recognized as the hospital's chief administrator. Blake turned around. His arrogance faltered for a second, replaced by confusion. Who is that? Sloan did not stop until she was 3 feet from him. She did not offer a hand. She did not smile. She opened a thin black folder she was carrying. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice cool and projecting authority. "My name is Sloan Vance. I am the general counsel for Jefferson Moore and the Moore Family Trust. I suggest you step away from my client." Blake laughed, a nervous barking sound. His lawyer. "You brought a lawyer. Good. Maybe you can explain to this old fool how the law works. I am the husband. I want my money or I end this." Sloan looked at him with the kind of pity one might reserve for a bug on a windshield. "You have no money, Mr. Sterling. And you certainly have no rights." "What are you talking about?" Blake snapped. "I signed the consent forms. I am in charge." "You signed a document at 5:15 this morning," Sloan corrected. "Specifically, you signed an informed consent for high-risk procedure. However, you failed to read Addendum A." She pulled a sheet of paper from her folder. It was a copy of the form Blake had scribbled on just an hour ago. She pointed to a paragraph near the bottom. "This clause states that in the event the primary signatory refuses to cover essential life-saving medical costs deemed necessary by the attending physician, said signatory immediately forfeits all medical and financial power of attorney to the secondary signatory." Blake stared at the paper. His face went pale. "Refusal to cover costs." He stammered. "I didn't refuse. I questioned the price." Sloan pulled out another piece of paper. This was a sworn affidavit signed by Dr. Aris. "At 5:25, you explicitly refused to pay for the experimental coagulant, despite being informed that it reduced mortality risk from 15% to 1%. You stated, and I quote, 'We cannot bankrupt the family for a 1% difference.' That refusal, Mr. Sterling, constituted medical abandonment under California law and triggered the immediate transfer of guardianship to Mr. Jefferson Moore." She snapped the folder shut. "Mr. Moore paid for the medication. Mr. Moore authorized the surgery. Mr. Moore is the legal guardian of Zoe Moore. You are nothing but a visitor. And as of right now, you are an unwelcome one." Blake turned to his lawyer, Mitch. "Do something. Tell her she is lying." Mitch looked at the documents. He looked at Sloan. He looked at the police officers. He took a step back away from Blake. "You signed it," Blake, Mitch mumbled. If you sign the waiver without reading it, there is nothing I can do. You refuse to pay. That is abandonment. Blake looked back at me. His eyes were wild with panic. The walls were closing in. The $10 million was evaporating like mist. You tricked me, he screamed, lunging toward me. You set me up. You knew I wouldn't pay. The two police officers stepped forward, blocking his path. One of them rested his hand on his taser. Mr. Sterling. The officer said, his voice bored but dangerous. Step back. You don't understand, Blake yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. He is the fraud. He pretended to be poor. He trapped me. Sloan stepped into his line of sight again. We are not done, Mr. Sterling. The demand you just made to Mr. Moore, the demand for $10 million in exchange for your wife's life, that is extortion. It is a felony. And since you made that demand in front of witnesses, including an officer of the court, she gestured to the hospital administrator. We will be filing charges immediately. Blake looked around the room. He looked at the disgusted faces of the nurses who had gathered at the station. He looked at the stone-cold face of the police officer. He looked at me sitting calmly in my chair. He realized then that he had not just lost the game. He had lost the board. He had lost the pieces. He had lost the right to play. This isn't over, he hissed, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. She is still my wife. I have rights to the house. I have rights to the assets. You can't just cut me out. Sloan smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. A shark's smile. Actually, we can. The unworthy heir clause in the trust was activated the moment you committed fraud on the yacht. The locks on the penthouse have already been changed. Your vehicle has been repossessed. Your joint accounts have been frozen pending a fraud investigation. You have no home. You have no car. You have no money. She gestured to the door. Officers, please remove this man from the premises. He is trespassing. Blake stood there for a second longer, vibrating with impotent rage. He looked at me one last time. He wanted to scream. He wanted to hit something. But he saw the taser. He saw the cold resolve in my eyes. He turned and walked away. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He slunk out the doors like the coward he was leaving his cheap lawyer behind. I watched him go. I checked my watch again. 6:10. The surgery was halfway done. Blake was on the street. The assault was over. Now the cleanup began. The morning sun was just beginning to burn through the Los Angeles smog when Blake Sterling stumbled out of the hospital doors and onto the sidewalk. He looked like a man who had been chewed up and spat out by a machine he didn't understand. His suit was rumpled, his tie was loose, and the scent of desperation clung to him more strongly than his cologne. He didn't look back at the hospital where his wife lay cut open on an operating table. He didn't think about her. He thought only about survival. He flagged down a taxi, his movements jerky and aggressive. He didn't have his Porsche. He didn't have his dignity. But he still had the penthouse, or so he thought. The taxi dropped him off in front of the gleaming glass tower in Century City where he and Zoe had lived for the past 3 years. It was a monument to excess, a building where the rent cost more than most people earned in a year. Blake loved it. He loved the way the doorman tipped his hat. He loved the way the neighbors looked at his car. He loved pretending he belonged there. He paid the driver with a crumpled 20 he found in his pocket, his last piece of cash, and marched toward the entrance. He needed to get inside. He needed to grab the watches, the jewelry, the cash he had stashed in the safe. He needed liquid assets. He needed to run. But as he approached the revolving doors, a large figure stepped into his path. It was Marcus, the head of building security. Marcus was a former linebacker with shoulders wide enough to block a doorway and a patience level that was notoriously short for entitled tenants like Blake. Mr. Sterling, Marcus said, his voice flat. You cannot go in there. Blake stopped, blinking in confusion. What are you talking about, Marcus? Get out of my way. I live here. I need to get my things. Not anymore, Marcus said. The lease has been terminated. The owner of the unit invoked the morality clause. Effective immediately, the owner. Blake sputtered. My wife is on the lease. She is in the hospital. You can't lock me out. The lease was under the Moore Trust, Marcus corrected, crossing his massive arms. Mr. Jefferson Moore is the trustee. He called us an hour ago. He sent over the paperwork. You have been evicted, Mr. Sterling, and I have been instructed to inform you that if you attempt to enter the premises, you will be arrested for trespassing. Evicted. The word hit Blake like a physical blow. He looked up at the building at the balcony on the 30th floor where he had smoked cigars and laughed at the little people below. It was gone. It was all gone. But my stuff, Blake screamed, his voice cracking. My clothes, my watches, my laptop. You can't just keep my property. That is theft. We didn't keep it, Marcus said. He pointed to the curb near the service entrance. There, sitting in a sad black pile, were 4 heavy-duty garbage bags. They looked like trash waiting for collection. Mr. Moore asked us to pack your personal effects, Marcus said. We were very thorough. Your clothes are in bag 1. Your toiletries are in bag 2. We didn't find any watches in the safe, Mr. Sterling. Just some empty boxes. Blake stared at the bags. He ran over to them, tearing open the plastic with frantic hands. Inside were his Italian suits crumpled and tossed together with his dirty gym clothes. His expensive loafers were scuffed against each other. It was his life reduced to refuse. He dug through the bags, throwing clothes onto the sidewalk, searching for the small velvet box where he kept his Patek Philippe watch. It wasn't there. He searched for the envelope of cash he kept in his sock drawer. Gone. "Where is it?" he yelled at Marcus. "Where is my money? Where are my watches?" "I don't know what you are talking about, sir," Marcus said, his face a mask of stone. "We packed what we found. Maybe you left them somewhere else, like on a boat." The mention of the boat was a knife twist. Blake knew then that I hadn't just evicted him. I had cleaned him out. I had likely taken the valuables as collateral against the money he stole. He stood up, surrounded by the scattered remnants of his wardrobe. People were walking by, business executives on their way to work, nannies pushing strollers. They looked at him with curiosity and disgust. The man in the wrinkled linen suit screaming at a doorman over a pile of trash bags. He was exactly what he feared most. He was pathetic. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, hoping for a miracle, hoping for a text from his lawyer saying it was all a mistake. Instead, it was a notification from his bank. "Alert, your checking account ending in 4492 has been frozen by court order. Reason: suspicion of embezzlement and money laundering." He stared at the screen. Frozen. Another buzz. "Alert, your savings account ending in 8821 has been frozen by court order." Another buzz. "Alert, your auto loan for the 2023 Porsche Panamera is in default. The vehicle has been flagged for immediate repossession. Location services have been activated." He watched as his digital life disintegrated in real time. Every notification was a hammer blow shattering another pillar of his existence. He had no home. He had no cash. He had no credit. He had no car. He looked around wildly. He needed to go somewhere. He needed to get away from the staring eyes. He thought of Tiffany. She was mad, yes, but maybe he could talk his way back in. Maybe he could crash on her couch for a few days until he figured this out. He dialed her number. It went straight to voicemail. She had blocked him. Of course she had. She was a shark too, and sharks don't swim with bleeding fish. He stood on the corner of Avenue of the Stars, the morning traffic roaring past him. He felt naked. He felt small. For the first time in his life, Blake Sterling was truly alone. He had built a fortress of lies to protect himself from the reality of his own mediocrity, and I had just blown it up with a single phone call. He looked down at his phone again. One last notification popped up. It was an email from a generic address. He opened it. It was a PDF file. A single page. It was a copy of the prenuptial agreement he had signed 5 years ago. The one he had laughed about with his friends, saying it was just a formality to make the old man happy. He had never read the fine print. He zoomed in on paragraph 14. Infidelity clause. In the event of proven adultery, the spouse forfeits all claims to marital assets, spousal support, and joint property. Attached to the email were 3 photos, high-resolution timestamps included. Photo 1. Blake entering Tiffany's apartment building at 2 a.m. last Tuesday. Photo 2. Blake kissing Tiffany on the balcony of the yacht. Photo 3. A screenshot of a text message from Blake to Tiffany saying, "Don't worry, babe. The old man is clueless. Once Zoe kicks it, we are going to Paris." The email had no text in the body, just a subject line, "Game over." Blake dropped the phone. It hit the pavement and the screen shattered, a spiderweb of cracks obscuring the image of his own betrayal. He looked at the cracked glass. He looked at his reflection in it, distorted, broken, ugly. A tow truck pulled up to the curb. The driver hopped out, checking a clipboard. He looked at the license plate of the Porsche parked down the street, the one Blake had abandoned earlier in his rage. "Hey, buddy," the driver called out to Blake. "You know where the keys are for this thing? Saves me dragging it." Blake didn't answer. He couldn't. His throat was closed tight with panic. The driver shrugged and started hooking up the chains. Blake watched his car, his symbol of status, his pride and joy, being lifted into the air like a dead animal. He watched it being towed away, disappearing into the traffic of Los Angeles. He was left standing on the sidewalk with 4 garbage bags and a broken phone. He had been a king at midnight. At 7 in the morning, he was a beggar. And the worst part, he knew it wasn't over. He knew the old man wasn't done. This was just the stripping of assets. The stripping of freedom was next. He looked up at the sky. It was a beautiful, clear blue day in California, the kind of day designed for winners. Blake Sterling grabbed a trash bag in each hand and started walking. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he had to keep moving, because if he stopped, the reality of what he had done would catch up to him, and it would crush him. The sun over Los Angeles was high and bright, a cruel spotlight shining down on the wreckage of Blake Sterling's life. He walked down the sidewalk carrying 2 heavy black garbage bags that contained the remnants of his existence. His Italian leather shoes, scuffed and ruined, slapped against the hot concrete. Sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes and matting his expensive haircut to his forehead. He was dehydrated, hungover, and fueled by a toxic cocktail of adrenaline and pure, unadulterated hatred. He stopped at a bus bench, dropping the bags. He sat down, breathing heavily. People walked by, giving him a wide berth. They saw a crazy person. They saw a homeless man in a ruined suit mumbling to himself. Blake didn't see them. He saw only my face. He saw the face of the man who had taken everything from him. In his twisted mind, he was the victim. He was the hero of a tragedy orchestrated by a villain he had underestimated. He checked his pockets. He had $11.40 in loose change and crumpled bills. It was not enough for a taxi. It was not enough for a hotel room. It was barely enough for a meal, but it was enough for a weapon. He stood up, leaving the garbage bags behind. He didn't need clothes where he was going. He needed leverage. He walked into a convenience store on the corner. The bell on the door chimed a cheerful welcome that clashed with the murderous look in his eyes. He walked past the aisles of snacks and sodas straight to the small section of household goods. He found it hanging on a peg hook, a utility knife with a retractable blade. Heavy duty. Sharp. It cost $8.99. He dumped his change on the counter. The clerk looked at him warily but took the money. Blake ripped the package open before he even left the store, testing the slide mechanism. The blade snicked out with a deadly metallic sound. It was small, but it was enough. If he put it against the throat of an old man, it would be more than enough. He walked back out into the heat. He knew where I was. I was still at the hospital, waiting for Zoe to wake up. I was sitting in my ivory tower, thinking I had won. Blake started walking back towards Cedars-Sinai. It was a 3-mile walk. He did it in under an hour, fueled by a manic energy that pushed his body past the point of exhaustion. He didn't have a plan beyond violence. He didn't have an escape route. He just had a desperate need to reclaim power. He imagined the scene. He would storm in. He would grab me. He would put the knife to my neck. He would demand a transfer. 5 million, 10 million. He would force me to open the banking app he knew I had. He would make me sign over the deed to the house. He would make me pay for the humiliation. He reached the hospital entrance. The security guard at the front desk was busy giving directions to a flower delivery guy. Blake didn't stop. He walked right past them, blending in with a group of visitors. He knew the way to the ICU. He knew the layout. But he also knew I wouldn't be in the general waiting room anymore. A man with my money would have been moved. He checked the directory. VIP patient services. 4th floor. That was where the rich people went. That was where the whales swam. He took the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He reached the 4th floor. The hallway was quiet, carpeted plush. There were no beeping machines here, just soft classical music and the smell of fresh lilies. He saw the door at the end of the hall. The Platinum Lounge. He knew I was in there. He could feel it. He adjusted his grip on the knife, holding it hidden inside the sleeve of his jacket. He took a deep breath. He kicked the door open. It slammed against the wall with a thunderous crash. I was sitting in a leather armchair near the window, sipping a cup of black coffee. The room was private, quiet, and serene. Sloan had gone downstairs to handle the press. I was alone. Blake stood in the doorway, chest heaving, eyes wild. He looked like a demon possessed. "You," he screamed. His voice was raw, shredded by hours of shouting. "You think you can do this to me? You think you can throw me away like trash?" He stepped into the room, kicking a small side table over. A vase shattered. Water and flowers spilled across the carpet. I put my coffee cup down slowly on the coaster. I did not stand up. I looked at him with the same calm detachment one might view a rabid dog. "Hello, Blake," I said. "I see you forgot your bags." "Shut up," Blake shrieked. "Shut up, you dirty old peasant." He pulled the knife from his sleeve. The blade caught the light. He extended his arm, pointing it at me. Get up right now. You're going to transfer the money. All of it, or I swear to God I will cut your throat right here." He began to advance on me. He was shouting racial slurs now, words that belonged in the darkest chapters of history, words he had likely been thinking for 5 years but had been too cowardly to say to my face. He called me every name he could think of, trying to reduce me to my skin color, trying to strip away my power with his hate. I watched him come closer. He was sloppy, he was off balance, he was holding the knife too high, telegraphing his intent. He was a man who had never been in a fight in his life, a man who thought violence was something you saw in movies. He didn't know about 1971, he didn't know about the jungle, he didn't know that long before I built a logistics empire, I had served 2 tours in a reconnaissance unit where silence and violence were the only currencies that mattered. He saw an old man in a chair. He didn't see the soldier who had never really left the war. "I am giving you one chance to leave, Blake," I said, my voice steady. "Put the knife down and walk away." Blake laughed, a manic, high-pitched sound. "Or what? You will call your lawyer. You will call the police. There is no time, Jeff. It is just you and me. And I have the knife." He lunged. It was a clumsy strike aimed at my chest. He put all his weight behind it, abandoning his defense, expecting me to cower, expecting me to beg. I didn't cower. I moved. I stood up in a fluid motion, stepping inside his guard. My left hand shot out, catching his wrist midair. I gripped it with a strength that surprised even me, the muscle memory of combat taking over instantly. I twisted his arm outward, using his own momentum against him. Blake screamed as his wrist snapped. The knife fell from his hand, landing on the carpet with a dull thud. I didn't stop there. I spun him around, kicking the back of his knee. His leg buckled. He collapsed to the floor face first. I dropped my knee onto the small of his back, pinning him to the ground. I grabbed his right arm, the one he had used to hold the knife, and pulled it up behind his back until his shoulder joint was at the breaking point. He howled in pain, thrashing like a fish on a hook. "Get off me! You are breaking my arm!" I leaned down close to his ear. My breathing was even. My heart rate hadn't barely spiked. "You made a mistake, Blake," I whispered. "You looked at my hands and you saw a laborer. You didn't look close enough to see the calluses were not from a plow. They were from a rifle." I applied a fraction more pressure. He sobbed into the carpet, the fight draining out of him as quickly as it had arrived. "Please," he begged. "Please, Dad. I am sorry. I am sick. I need help. Don't hurt me." He was back to begging. The racism, the hate, the arrogance, it all vanished the moment he lost physical dominance. He was a bully, and bullies always crumble when they meet true strength. I held him there. I could hear running footsteps in the hallway now. The nurses had heard the commotion. Security was on the way. Sloan was likely running up the stairs, but for this moment, we were alone. "You called me poor," I said, my voice low and hard. "You mocked my clothes. You mocked my life. You thought money was the only measure of a man." I twisted his arm again, just enough to remind him who was in charge. "I have billions, Blake. I have more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. But right now, looking at you lying on the floor crying like a child with a broken toy, I realized something." I leaned closer, my lips brushing his ear. "You are the pauper here. You are not just poor in money, son. You are poor in spirit. You are poor in character. You are poor in soul. And that is a poverty no bank transfer can ever fix." The door burst open. 4 security guards rushed in, tasers drawn. Sloan was right behind them, her face pale with worry. "Mr. Moore," she shouted. I released Blake's arm. I stood up, smoothing down my jacket. I stepped away from him, kicking the utility knife toward the guards. "He fell," I said calmly. "He seems to have injured himself." The guards swarmed Blake, pinning him down, handcuffing him. He was sobbing loudly now, snot running down his face, babbling about how I had attacked him, how I was a ninja, how I was crazy. Sloan walked over to me. She looked at Blake on the floor, then at me. She saw the calmness in my eyes. She saw the lack of fear. She understood. "Are you injured, sir?" she asked. "I am fine, Sloan," I said. "I just took out the trash." The police arrived 2 minutes later. They dragged Blake up from the floor. He couldn't even stand on his own. His expensive suit was ruined. His face was mashed from the carpet. He looked at me with eyes full of terror. He finally saw me. He finally saw the wolf he had mistaken for a sheep. "You are going to jail, Blake," I said as they dragged him past me, "for a long time. And do not worry about the hospital bill for your arm. I will pay for it. I can afford it." They took him away. The room fell silent again. The smell of his fear and cheap cologne lingered in the air. I sat back down in my leather chair. I picked up my coffee. It was still warm. My hands were steady. I took a sip. I looked out the window at the Los Angeles skyline. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the city. The war was over. The enemy was defeated. Now I just had to wait for my daughter to wake up. I had cleared the path for her. I had burned down the weeds. Now she could grow. Now she could live. The sounds of the struggle faded down the corridor like a dying storm. Blake Sterling was gone. He had been dragged away by the consequences of his own arrogance, leaving behind nothing but a scuff mark on the carpet and a heavy silence that felt both terrified and holy. I stood in the center of the Platinum Lounge, my chest heaving slightly, not from exertion, but from the sheer weight of what I had just done. I had dismantled a man's life in under 12 hours. I had sent the father of my potential grandchildren to prison. I had used my wealth as a cudgel. I walked to the window and watched the squad car pull away its lights, flashing red and blue against the Los Angeles dusk. It was over. The enemy was neutralized. But as the adrenaline of the fight drained out of me, a cold, creeping fear took its place. I turned my back on the window and looked toward the recovery room where my daughter lay. This was the part I had not planned for. I had assumed the role of protector, judge, and executioner without asking for permission. I had destroyed Zoe's marriage. Even if Blake was a monster, he was the monster she had chosen. Love is a complicated, messy thing, and often it does not make sense. I have seen women weep for men who beat them. I have seen wives mortgage their futures to save husbands who gambled it all away. I was terrified that when Zoe opened her eyes, she would not see a savior. She would see an interfering old man who had ruined her life. I washed my face in the private bathroom, scrubbing the sweat and the memory of violence from my skin. I put my canvas jacket back on, smoothing the wrinkles. I needed to look like her father again, not the CEO, and certainly not the soldier. I walked into the recovery room. The lights were dimmed. The steady, rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of victory. Zoe was pale, her skin translucent against the white sheets, but her chest rose and fell with a strength that hadn't been there yesterday. The mechanical valve I had paid for was doing its job. I pulled a chair to her bedside and sat down. I took her hand. It was warm. I waited. Hours passed. The sun went down completely, and the city lights turned the window into a glittering tapestry. Then her eyelids fluttered. A small groan escaped her lips. I leaned forward, my heart in my throat. "Zoe," I whispered. I am here, baby girl. Daddy is here." Her eyes opened. They were glassy, unfocused at first. She blinked, trying to process the room, the pain, the tubes. Then her gaze found mine. A flicker of recognition sparked in the brown depths. "Daddy," she rasped. Her voice was like sandpaper. "I am here," I repeated, squeezing her hand. "You made it. The surgery was a success. You have a new heart valve. You are going to be okay." She licked her dry lips. She tried to turn her head, looking around the room. I knew who she was looking for. I braced myself for the question. I braced myself for the anger. Where, she whispered. "Where is he?" She didn't say his name, but I knew. She was looking for her husband. She was looking for the man who was supposed to be holding her other hand. I took a deep breath. I decided to tell the truth. Not the brutal, violent truth of the last hour, but the necessary truth. "He is not here, Zoe," I said gently. He had to leave." I watched her face, waiting for the tears, waiting for the panic. But they didn't come. Instead, her brow furrowed. She looked at me with an intensity that pierced through the anesthesia fog. Did he sign?" she asked. The question surprised me. "Did he sign the consent forms?" I said. "Yes, baby. He signed them. That is why the doctors could operate. No, she whispered. She tried to shake her head, but stopped, wincing from the pain. Not those papers. The others. I frowned. What others? Zoe pulled her hand from mine. Her movements were weak, uncoordinated, but desperate. She pointed toward the small closet in the corner of the room where the nurses had stored her personal belongings. My bag, she wheezed. The blue one. Get it. I stood up and went to the closet. I found her leather tote bag. It was heavy. I brought it to the bed. Open it, she said. The side pocket, the key. I unzipped the side pocket. Inside there was a small silver key. The safe, she said, pointing to the built-in security box in the wall of the room. I was confused, but I followed her instructions. I unlocked the room safe. Inside there was a thick manila envelope. It was sealed with tape. I took it out and held it up. Is this it? I asked. She nodded. Her eyes were closed now, tears leaking from the corners. Open it, she whispered. Read it. I tore the envelope open. I pulled out the stack of documents. My hands began to shake as I read the title page. Petition for dissolution of marriage. It was a divorce filing. It was dated 3 days ago. It was signed by Zoe Moore. I flipped the page. Beneath the legal jargon, there was a handwritten letter addressed to me. And beneath that, there were photos. My stomach turned. They were photos of Zoe. Photos I had never seen. In one, she had a black eye skillfully covered with makeup but visible in the harsh light of a bathroom selfie. In another, there was a bruise on her upper arm, the distinct shape of 4 fingers and a thumb, a grip mark. I looked at my daughter lying in the bed. The rage that I thought I had exhausted flared back to life, white-hot and blinding. He had hit her. The man I had just twisted into the carpet had put his hands on my little girl. I looked at the next document. It was a bank statement, a secret account she had opened in her maiden name. It showed systematic transfers out of their joint account. She had been siphoning money away. She had been planning an escape. I didn't know, I stammered. Zoe, why didn't you tell me? Zoe opened her eyes. They were filled with a profound sadness, but also a steely resolve that mirrored my own. I was ashamed, she whispered. I wanted it to work, Daddy. I wanted to prove I could have the perfect life, the perfect husband. But he changed. The gambling, the drinking. She took a ragged breath. When I got sick, he got worse. He blamed me. He said I was expensive. He said I was broken. Tears streamed down my face now unchecked. I dropped the papers on the bed and buried my face in my hands. I had failed her. I had been so busy protecting my secret, so busy building my empire that I hadn't seen the rot in my own garden. I was leaving him, she said. That is why I needed the surgery. I needed to be strong enough to run. I signed those papers the day before I was admitted. I was going to serve him when I woke up. She looked at the door again. Where is he really, Daddy? Don't lie to me. I wiped my face. I looked at her. He is in jail, Zoe, I said. Her eyes widened. Jail. Why? Because he tried to extort me, I said. He threatened to let you die if I didn't give him $10 million. He came here with a knife. He tried to attack me. Zoe let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He tried to attack you, she said. That idiot. He never knew, did he? Knew what I asked. Zoe smiled weakly. She reached out and touched the sleeve of my old canvas jacket. He never knew who you really were. I froze. What do you mean, Daddy? She said, her voice soft and loving. Do you think I am stupid? Do you think I didn't notice when you bought the farm next to us when I was 10 and paid cash? Do you think I didn't see the letters from the investment banks you thought you hid in the attic? I stared at her. She knew. She had always known. I know you own more logistics, she said. I Googled you in college. I saw your picture in the business journals. Jefferson Moore, the silent billionaire. But you never said anything, I whispered. You let me drive that old truck. You let me live in that shack. Because that is who you wanted to be, she said. That is the dad I loved. I didn't care about the money. I didn't want the money. I wanted to build my own life. I wanted to find a man who loved me for me, not for your empire. She closed her eyes, again tears tracking through the makeup she hadn't worn in days. That is why I never told Blake, she said. I knew. I knew if he found out he would never let me go. He would drain you dry. He would turn into a monster. He was already a monster, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Yes, she said, but he was a monster on a leash. If he knew about the money, he might have killed me sooner. She squeezed my hand. I was protecting you, Daddy. I was protecting you from him. I broke down then. The great Jefferson Moore, the man who made unions tremble, the man who had just taken down a predator without breaking a sweat, wept like a child. My daughter had endured abuse, she had endured illness, she had planned a desperate escape, all while keeping my secret to protect me. She had shielded me from her husband's greed, just as I had tried to shield her from the world's cruelty. We were protecting each other, I managed to say, and we almost lost everything. Zoe looked at me. Her grip on my hand was surprisingly strong. But we didn't, she said. You came, you saved me. I didn't save you, I said, shaking my head. The doctor saved you. You saved yourself with those papers. No, she said firmly. You stood up to him. You paid for the medicine. You put him where he belongs. You saved me, Daddy. And now we are both free. I looked at the papers scattered on the bed, the divorce petition, the evidence. It was all there. We didn't need to fear a legal battle. We didn't need to fear his claims on the estate. Zoe had armed herself long before I arrived. We are free, I repeated. I stood up and gathered the papers, putting them back in the envelope. I put the envelope in my jacket pocket, right next to the black card that Blake had coveted so much. What happens now? Zoe asked. Her voice was getting sleepy, the exhaustion of the day catching up with her. Now, I said, smoothing the hair back from her forehead. Now you sleep. You heal. And when you are strong enough, we are going to go for a boat ride. A boat ride, she mumbled, her eyes closing. Yes, I said. On a yacht called the Golden Horizon. It belongs to us, baby girl. It belongs to us. She smiled, drifting off into a sleep that was finally safe. I sat back in the chair and watched over her. The hospital room felt different now. It wasn't a place of sickness anymore. It was a fortress. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could put down my weapon. My daughter knew me. She really knew me. And she loved me anyway. That was a wealth that no amount of logistics contracts could ever buy. Blake Sterling was sitting in a holding cell, probably screaming about his rights. I was sitting next to my daughter, holding her hand. I knew who the winner was, and it wasn't even close. 6 months had passed since the night I dismantled my son-in-law's life in a hospital waiting room. The Pacific Ocean was a deep, brilliant blue stretching out to the horizon in every direction. The deck of the Golden Horizon was warm under my feet, the teak wood polished to a mirror shine. This time there was no techno music thumping from the speakers. There were no strangers drinking my champagne. There was only the sound of the wind, the cry of the gulls, and the gentle laughter of my daughter. Zoe stood at the railing looking out at the water. She wore a simple sundress that exposed the thin vertical scar running down the center of her chest. She did not hide it. She wore it like a medal of honor, a testament to the battle she had fought and won. Her color had returned. The gray pallor of death was gone, replaced by a healthy glow that owed nothing to makeup and everything to freedom. She held a glass of iced tea in one hand and a small velvet pouch in the other. I stood beside her, leaning against the rail. I was wearing a new linen shirt, one Zoe had bought for me. I still preferred my canvas jacket, but today was a celebration and I could not say no to her. We watched the wake of the yacht churn the water into white foam. Are you ready? I asked. Zoe nodded. She opened the pouch and tipped it into her palm. The platinum wedding band glinted in the sunlight. It was a heavy ring encrusted with diamonds that Blake had insisted on paid for with money he had stolen from her accounts. It was a symbol of his vanity, not his love. I thought I would feel sad, Zoe said, rolling the metal between her fingers. I thought I would mourn the time I lost. But I don't. I just feel light. You lost weight, I said, smiling. About 200 pounds of useless husband. Zoe laughed. It was a real laugh, free from the shadow of fear that used to darken her eyes whenever he walked into a room. She pulled her arm back and threw the ring. We watched it arc through the air, spinning end over end, catching the sun one last time before it hit the water with a tiny, insignificant splash. It sank immediately, swallowed by the depths, gone forever. Good riddance, she whispered. I put my arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me, solid and alive. We stood there for a long time, watching the ocean erase the spot where the ring had fallen. We were the owners of the boat, the masters of our destiny, and for the first time in a long time, the horizon looked clear. While we enjoyed the salt air, Blake Sterling was breathing the stale, recycled air of the California State Penitentiary system. Justice had been swift and merciless. The district attorney, armed with the evidence Sloan and I provided, did not offer a plea deal. The charges were too numerous, and the evidence was too damning. Extortion, wire fraud, identity theft, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and the most damaging of all, the attempted medical homicide of his wife through the calculated refusal of care. The trial lasted 3 days. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. The sentence was 15 years in a maximum security facility. The judge, a stern woman who had no patience for men who preyed on their families, added a stipulation that he serve at least 85% of his time before being eligible for parole. Blake didn't scream when the gavel came down. He just slumped in his chair, a broken man in a cheap suit provided by his public defender. He looked at me one last time before they led him away. There was no hate in his eyes anymore, only a vast, empty regret. Life inside was not kind to him. I received updates from a contact I had on the corrections board. Blake had entered the system with a reputation. Prisoners have a code, a hierarchy of morality that exists even in the darkest places. They despise men who hurt women. They despise men who attack the elderly. Blake had done both. On his first day in general population, he tried to ingratiate himself with a group of inmates, flashing the same arrogant smile that had worked at country clubs. He tried to tell them he was a businessman, a victim of a misunderstanding. But word travels fast inside. They knew who he was. They knew he had pulled a knife on a 69-year-old black man in a hospital. They knew he had used racial slurs while doing it. The irony was poetic. The man who thought his whiteness made him untouchable, who thought his skin color was a shield, was now locked in a cage where he was the minority. The inmates he had looked down on, the men he would have crossed the street to avoid, were now the masters of his universe. My contact told me that Blake was working in the laundry detail. It was hard, hot work. He spent his days scrubbing stains out of other men's uniforms, his hands raw and blistered. He kept his head down. He didn't speak. He had learned the lesson I tried to teach him in the Platinum Lounge. He was learning what it meant to be truly poor. He was learning that character, not a bank account, was the only currency that mattered, and his account was overdrawn. I didn't take pleasure in his suffering. I didn't wake up every morning hoping he was in pain. I simply didn't care. He was a weed I had pulled from my garden. I threw him on the compost pile and forgot about him. He was the past. Zoe was the future. The yacht turned, heading back toward the marina. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I looked at my daughter, her face turned toward the wind, her eyes closed in contentment. I thought about the journey that had brought us here. I thought about the years of silence, the years of hiding my success to protect her from the corruption of wealth. I had wondered in the dark hours of the night if I had made a mistake. If I had told her sooner, would she have avoided Blake? Would she have chosen differently? Perhaps. But perhaps not. We learn who we are by the obstacles we overcome. Zoe had walked through the fire and come out steel. If I had paved her road with gold, she might never have learned how to walk on her own 2 feet. Money is a strange tool. People think it buys happiness. It doesn't. I have seen miserable billionaires and joyous paupers. Money cannot buy love. It cannot buy health. It cannot buy time. But what I realized on that terrible night in the hospital was that money can buy something else. It can buy a sword. It can buy a shield. It can buy the leverage necessary to crush those who would harm the innocent. I spent my life building more global logistics, not because I wanted a yacht or a mansion, but because I wanted to be the man who could say no. I wanted to be the man who could not be bullied, bought, or broken. I wanted to ensure that if the wolf ever came to the door, I would have the means to skin it. Blake Sterling made the mistake of judging a book by its cover. He saw a worn jacket and assumed weakness. He saw a black man from the South and assumed ignorance. He saw a father's love and assumed it was a vulnerability he could exploit. He didn't know that a father's love is the most dangerous force on earth. It is a love that builds empires. It is a love that destroys monsters. The boat docked. The crew, respectful and efficient, tied off the lines. I helped Zoe onto the pier. She didn't need my help, but she took my hand anyway. We walked down the dock toward the parking lot where my old truck was parked next to her new sedan. "We are going to be okay, Daddy," she said, kissing me on the cheek. "I know we are," I replied. I watched her drive away, heading toward her new apartment, her new life. She was safe. She was free. I climbed into my truck. The engine roared to life with a familiar rumble. I looked at the yacht one last time, gleaming in the twilight. It was a nice boat, but it was just a thing. The real treasure was driving away in that sedan. I am Jefferson Moore. I have spent my life moving things from point A to point B. I have built bridges across oceans, but I have learned that sometimes the most important thing a man can do is burn a bridge, especially when the person standing on it is a devil. I put the truck in gear and drove away. I had a business to run. I had a garden to tend, and I had a life to live. Quiet, powerful, and absolutely unapologetically mine. Did you enjoy this story? Let me know in the comments if you have ever had to reveal your true strength to someone who underestimated you. And do not forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. Until next time, remember to watch who you step on, because you never know who is holding the ladder. True power is silent. It does not need to roar to be felt. Blake Sterling made the fatal mistake of confusing humility with weakness and wealth with worth. He believed that money gave him the right to trample on others, never realizing that the ground he walked on belonged to the very man he despised. We must learn that character is the only currency that never devalues. Treat the janitor with the same respect as the CEO, because you never know when the tables will turn. In the end, integrity is the only shield that cannot be repossessed. If you enjoyed watching justice be served cold, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of retribution. Share your thoughts in the comments. Did I go too far, or did Blake get exactly what he deserved? I read every single one. Until next time.